Chapter 686. Marshall fell to the ground, her entire body twitching in pain. Her face was devoid of blood, her pupils dilated, gradually losing their color. Her consciousness was gradually blurring, the scene in front of her quickly spinning. She felt as if her heart was about to stop beating. No, her heart was about to disappear. A heart-wrenching pain. She finally knew what it was like. The Imperial Tutor smiled in satisfaction and said, "Now you know how powerful it is." He walked past her in large strides and headed straight for Tang Zheng. Li Xiaotian clenched her teeth and secretly said, "Go all out." Her figure flashed and blocked in front of the Imperial Tutor. However, she was not in a hurry to make a move because she knew that she was not the Imperial Tutor's opponent. If she made a move, it would mean that she would lose. Her goal was to delay the Imperial Tutor and buy time for Tang Zheng. The Imperial Tutor looked at Li Xiaotian with a murderous look and said, "You did not hesitate to sacrifice your life for him, is it really worth it? You are the Holy Maiden of Li Palace." Li Xiaotian lightly said, "Whether it is worth it or not, I am the clearest about it. Since you are so muddle-headed, then there is no need for me to persuade you. Li Palace's palace master knows that I killed you, so he can't do anything to me. Moreover, with Tang Zheng's technique, a mere Li Palace can be turned into ashes in the blink of an eye." The Imperial Tutor arrogantly said. "Don't boast too early, be careful not to sprain your tongue." The Imperial Tutor smiled and did not comment. He raised his leg and walked towards Li Xiaotian. "Wait a minute." Li Xiaotian immediately reached out her hand to stop him. The Imperial Tutor subconsciously stopped and said, "What, you still have your last words?" Li Xiaotian rolled her eyes and said, "Yes." Too late. The Imperial Tutor did not give her the chance and directly chopped at her with the broken sword. Li Xiaotian's clothes were cut open and blood splattered out. She was injured. With just one sword, without the shooting sun arrow, she could not block one of the Imperial Tutor's attacks. The Imperial Preceptor arrogantly chased after him and said, "You are too weak. There is no challenge or sense of accomplishment in killing you." Li Xiaotian's eyes flashed with despair. This was the result of trying to be brave. If he didn't pretend to be a good person, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state. From the corner of her eyes, she glanced at Tang Zheng and discovered that his eyes were still tightly shut. The War Soul sword in his hand was like a tiger giving birth to wind, as fast as lightning, causing the wind in the sword forest to become even stronger. "Tang Zheng, I hope I've bought enough time for you," she thought in despair. She unwillingly raised her head to block, but the Imperial Preceptor's broken sword was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. She could not block it at all. As long as the broken sword fell again, her life would come to an end. Whoosh! A strand of hair on her forehead was sliced into two by the sword chi. She could even feel a burning pain on her cheeks. Creak creak. Suddenly a cry sounded in her ears. Then a ball of fire brushed past her body and soared into the air, spraying towards the Imperial Preceptor. The heat wave hit him in the face. The Imperial Preceptor had no choice but to take half a step back. Li Xiaotian also hurriedly retreated, escaping from the gates of hell. Turning her head, she found that Xiao Bai was standing by her feet. He raised his little head and pouted his little mouth as he spat out fire. Li Xiaotian was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to hug Xiao Bai and kiss him. She had seen Xiao Bai's power, so she hurriedly urged, "Xiao Bai, burn him to death." The Imperial Preceptor was burned by the fire and appeared to be in a sorry state. He angrily roared, "Little bastard, you escaped a calamity before. This time without Tang Zheng, I want to see what kind of waves you can stir up." Xiao Bai screamed again and did not retreat an inch. "Die!" The Imperial Preceptor shouted as the broken sword in his hand slashed down. Boom! Flames soared into the air and completely enveloped the broken sword. However, the broken sword immediately burst out a bright sword light, suppressing the flames and pressing forward. The flames retreated bit by bit. Xiao Bai's claws dug deep into the soil, resisting the impact of the broken sword with difficulty. Gradually, the look in his eyes became dim. Previously, in the battle with the water sword, he had consumed a lot of energy and had not recovered yet. But in order to protect Tang Zheng, he resolutely stood out. But now he was exhausted and had reached the end. He turned his head and glanced at Tang Zheng as if to say his final farewell. Then he clenched his teeth and let out a sharp cry. The flames suddenly exploded. The broken sword swung back. The Imperial Preceptor's arm suddenly shook and the broken sword almost flew out of his hand. He was shocked. This little guy's strength really made him look at him with new eyes. But after all, he was an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. He understood that at this critical moment he could not drop the ball. Thus, he endured the rebounding force from the broken sword and swung it down again. Whoosh! The air was quickly split into two halves. The sword chi fell on Xiao Bai's head. In the next second it seemed to be split into two. Li Xiaotian saw this, but there was nothing he could do. He unwillingly shouted no, but it was useless. Clang! With a muffled sound, the broken sword bounced up and flew out of the Imperial Preceptor's hand. The Imperial Preceptor was stunned and exclaimed, "How could this be?" Looking carefully, he saw a huge turtle shell in front of Xiao Bai, completely covering Xiao Bai. There was a white mark on the turtle shell. Apparently, it was left by the broken sword. Although there was a white mark, the turtle shell was still intact. A small head drilled out of the turtle shell and kept blinking at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's big eyes were also filled with joy. He stretched out his small paw and touched Gui Chensui's head. Although Gui Chensui's attack power was not strong because of its nature, its defensive ability was particularly strong. This had been proved just now. It had been hiding in Tang Zheng's backpack. Because its fighting power was not strong, it had not participated in the battle. At this moment, Tang Zheng was in danger. Gui Chensui finally fought back. What is this? The Imperial Preceptor looked at the trembling broken sword in the mud and then looked at Gui Chensui and exclaimed, "I, Gui Chensui, will absolutely not allow you to hurt the exalted immortal." Gui Chensui spoke in human language and said firmly, "You are a demon beast, but you actually cultivated to the level where you can speak human language." The State Preceptor was startled as if he saw a ghost. Exalted immortal? Who is the exalted immortal? His eyes turned and stared at Tang Zheng. He said incredulously, "You actually called him an immortal. What qualifications does he have?" "Immortal's magical power is not something you can guess," Gui Chensui said disdainfully. The Imperial Preceptor restrained his expression and said, "I don't care what immortal he is. Even if he is a real immortal, I will not let him return to my sword forest." His figure flashed and he picked up his broken sword. Like a gust of wind, he swept over Gui Chensui's head. Gui Chensui could only sigh. It was too late to stop him. Whoosh! Tang Zheng was surrounded by a gust of wind. His eyes were still closed. In his mind, the situation of the sword forest was completely presented. He saw Wu and Li Xiaotian risking their lives to protect him. He saw Wu fall to the ground. He saw Xiao Bai and Gui Chensui's decisive action. But he could not help them. Because he had reached the most critical moment. That trace of understanding was getting clearer and clearer. He felt that he was inextricably linked with the sword chi in the sword forest. The wind between heaven and earth was like a link between him and the sword chi, transmitting each other's information. The battle soul in his hand gradually slowed down. But he still repeated the 5 moves of flying immortals from outer sky over and over again. It was a hair-raising process. "Master, the sword chi has a spirit. If you can communicate with it, the sword chi can be collected in your hand." A voice suddenly sounded in Tang Zheng's mind. He immediately remembered that it was the voice of the sword spirit. At that time, he obtained the sword spirit and the wisp of remnant soul in the snow mountain in the northeast. Moreover, with the original battle soul and the battle soul, the 3 combined and fused into a new sword spirit. However, the sword spirit had always been silent, and other than discovering that it had allowed the war soul sword to level up to a heaven-level magic treasure, it did not display any other mystical abilities, so he temporarily threw it to the back of his mind. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the sword spirit took the initiative to speak. "You're saying that the sword chi has a spirit. As long as I can communicate with it, I can collect all the sword chi for my own use?" Tang Zheng asked in surprise. With so many sword chi, if he could collect them all, then Tang Zheng's cultivation would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. It was completely a blessing in disguise. "Yes." The sword spirit replied, "I can help, master." "How can you help me?" "The sword spirit has a spirit. The sword chi also has a spirit. The 2 are connected and can be fused into one." The sword spirit said solemnly. "Then hurry up and act." Tang Zheng had already seen the imperial tutor pass Gui Chensui and Xiao Bai and fly above his head. He was condescending and slashed down with his sword. He was bound to heavily injure him. He had no time to resist. He could only place his hopes on the sword spirit. The sword spirit received the order. The battle soul sword light shone brightly like a bright sun. A buzzing sword sound rang out as if it was speaking. Then a strange scene appeared. Buzzing sounds immediately rose and fell from all directions. It was like an echo in response to the battle soul sword cry. These sounds seemed to be communicating with each other. It was ringing non-stop. The imperial tutor who was in midair had a huge change in expression. Although he did not understand what the buzzing sound meant, he had already sensed that the aura in the sword forest had undergone an earth-shattering change. It was a change that made him afraid. A strong wind blew and the green bamboos swayed non-stop. The sound of shattering rose and fell one after another. The Imperial Tutor had no choice but to stop his attack. He landed on the ground and looked around. Looking at the chaotic sword forest, he shouted, "What's going on?" There was a mysterious connection between him and the sword forest. This was a special connection that all the Imperial Tutors of the past would cultivate. Therefore, the Imperial Tutor could control everything in the sword forest as he wished. But at this moment he realized that this connection was rapidly weakening. This was unprecedented and unheard of. All the Imperial Tutors had never encountered such a thing. Gradually his eyes revealed fear for the first time. It was a fear that came from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 687. The crackling sound became louder and louder, continuous. As far as the eye could see, the swaying bamboo exploded one after another with a loud bang, turning into pieces that drifted away with the wind. The Imperial Preceptor's impression of this scene was too deep. Every time he successfully comprehended a sword technique, there would be a corresponding bamboo that would explode. If he was lucky enough, there would be a treasure sword hidden in the bamboo. From then on, the treasure sword would belong to the person who comprehended the sword technique. Every time the sword technique was comprehended to a higher level, there would be more bamboo that would explode. That year, after the Imperial Preceptor had succeeded in comprehending the sword technique, 18 bamboo had exploded at the same time. It was a spectacular sight. After Junko had comprehended the sword technique, only one bamboo had exploded. This meant that her sword technique was still worlds apart from the Imperial Preceptor's. At this moment, the Imperial Preceptor looked at the exploding bamboo, which had already exceeded 18. Could it be that Tang Zheng's sword technique was so powerful that it was even more than the number of bamboo that he had exploded back then? Then what kind of sword technique would this be? Immediately he was anxious and angry in his heart. Without any grace he roared, "Stop, quickly stop." How could Tang Zheng care about him? His emotions fluctuated as he could clearly feel that the exploded bamboo had turned into strands of sword chi. The sword chi crazily poured into the War Soul sword and then transmitted into his 8 extraordinary meridians. In an instant he was like a huge pool that was flooded with a large amount of water. These sword chi quickly transformed into true chi and stored in his body. The true chi rapidly soared. At the same time, most of the sword chi was absorbed by the War Soul sword. The light on the War Soul sword became more and more intense, and the dark appearance of the War Soul sword began to change bit by bit. The veins on the Imperial Preceptor's forehead bulged as he roared, "Tang Zheng, I will kill you." His hands quickly formed a seal, and a hand seal rose into the air and circled above his head. Previously, when he used the sword technique, he did not need to form a seal at all. This was because his cultivation had already reached a certain level, and ordinary sword techniques could be used with just a thought. But this time he actually formed a seal, which meant that this move was definitely not simple. The handprint quickly circled above his head. He gripped the broken sword with both hands and slashed forward while roaring, "1,000 killing slash." The broken sword flew out of his hand, and the handprint above his head also flew out like a meteor and merged with the broken sword. In an instant, the broken sword underwent an earth-shattering change. The broken part of the sword actually grew out again, forming a complete sword. Li Xiaotian was dumbstruck by the rebirth of the broken sword. However, Tang Zheng remained unmoved like a boulder as he shouted, "Explode!" Pah, pah. All the bamboos in the forest exploded, turning into strands of sword energy. Beams of light also rose from some of the bamboos. Clearly there were swords hidden in these bamboos. It was as if Junko had obtained them. These swords shone brightly, but they were like meteors that streaked across the sky, exploding with a loud bang, turning into specks of light. Along with the overflowing sword chi, they all rushed into the War Soul sword. A portion of them was absorbed by Tang Zheng's body and transformed into true chi. The Imperial Advisor's 1,000 killing slash had already arrived in front of Tang Zheng. The powerful sword chi cut open wounds on his body, and in the next moment, it seemed like it was going to reap his life. Break. Just at this moment, Tang Zheng's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened as if they were glowing. He opened his mouth and roared, "Heaven Flying Immortal." Tang Zheng had finally mastered the 6th move of the Heaven Flying Immortal sword technique. Swish. The War Soul sword flew out from his hand and turned into a bolt of lightning, striking the broken sword. Crack. With a crisp sound, the newly grown part of the broken sword broke with a loud bang. The Imperial advisor spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground with one knee, looking at the scene in front of him in shock. How could this be? The 1,000-killing slash is still not his match. How is this possible? He muttered to himself as if he had been possessed. But in the next second, his pupils widened even more, because the War Soul Sword did not stop. Instead, it flew towards him like a hot knife through butter. He flipped backwards in the air and dodged the attack. The War Soul Sword brushed past his scalp as it flew past. Before he could even catch his breath, the War Soul Sword changed its direction in midair and stabbed towards his back. At such a long distance, Tang Zheng was actually able to change his direction through the air. He suddenly realized something and exclaimed, "Imperial Sword Technique, you actually learned the Imperial Sword Technique." This was the technique that the Imperial advisor yearned for even in his dreams, but the ninjutsu did not include the Imperial Sword Technique. He had only heard of it from his seniors, and once he cultivated the Imperial Sword Technique, he would be like a god, taking a person's head from 1,000 miles away. He never thought that Tang Zheng would actually know such a technique at such a young age. Tang Zheng had long since cultivated the Imperial Sword Technique, but the Imperial Sword Technique consumed a lot of the caster's innate chi, unless he really found a flying sword. Flying swords were different from ordinary magic treasures. Only with special materials could they be forged into flying swords. Although the War Soul Sword was already a heaven-level magic treasure, it was still not a flying sword, which was why Tang Zheng did not often use the Imperial Sword Technique, but now that he had finally comprehended the sixth move of the Flying Immortals from Heaven, everything had changed. Flying Immortals from Heaven, as the name suggested, were like immortals flying from the heavens. This immortal was the sword, and the sword in his hand turned into an immortal. It was like an arm, and wherever he pointed it would be there. It was perfectly compatible with the essence of the Imperial Sword Technique, merging the two into one. Tang Zheng was able to control the sword so smoothly through the air. The Imperial advisor was extremely regretful. He did not investigate clearly, causing his efforts to be in vain and his losses to be huge. Seeing the War Soul Sword carrying a berserk aura attack him once again, the Imperial advisor was unarmed and did not fight back. With a thought, he disappeared without a trace. Boom. The War Soul Sword slashed onto the ground, causing mud to fly up. Escape technique. Tang Zheng was awe-inspiring. The Imperial advisor had an escape technique, so even if he had comprehended the sixth move of the Flying Immortals from Heaven, it would still be useless. He definitely won't be willing to escape like this. He must be hiding somewhere, waiting for an opportunity. With regards to the Imperial advisor's sinister methods, Tang Zheng still remembered them clearly. He immediately came in front of Wu Mian, afraid that the Imperial advisor would take her hostage again. Marshall was in a daze, his entire body twitching, his eyes rolled back as if he could lose his life at any moment. What should we do? He was already certain that his innate chi would only stimulate the goo, allowing it to take Marshall's life even faster, so he did not dare to act rashly. Marshall, I will always be by your side. You must persevere. I will definitely find a way to save you. Tang Zheng whispered into Marshall's ear, not knowing if she could hear him. Li Xiaotian did not have the mood to care about Marshall's life and death. She was looking around in surprise and shouted, "The sword forest has disappeared." The sword forest had indeed disappeared. The originally lush green bamboo had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a vast and empty wasteland. The village not far away also entered her eyes, but the dense white fog in the distance caused her heart to instantly fall to the bottom. Although they had escaped the shackles of the sword forest, they were still trapped in the Imperial advisor's mansion. The thick fog outside was still an insurmountable barrier. Let's leave this place quickly, Li Xiaotian urged. Tang Zheng swept his eyebrows, causing Li Xiaotian's heart to tighten. He had the urge to retreat and exclaimed, "Your cultivation." Tang Zheng coldly snorted but did not reply. Just now, when the sword chi entered his body, it caused his innate chi to soar, breaking through to the 9th level of Anidia in one fell swoop. From the 7th level of Anidia to the 9th level of Anidia, 2 levels of cultivation had broken through like a hot knife through butter. This was only a portion of the sword chi. The majority of the sword chi had been absorbed by the War Soul Sword spirit. One could imagine how powerful the sword chi contained within the sword forest was. It was simply a treasure trove. No wonder the Imperial advisor's mansion regarded it as an important place. It was a pity that the Imperial advisor did not know how powerful the heaven-flying immortal sword technique that Tang Zheng cultivated was, nor did he know that the War Soul Sword contained a sword spirit. Therefore, Tang Zheng was able to take advantage of such a great opportunity and absorb all the sword qi in the sword forest. Without the nourishment of the sword qi, the treasured swords that were originally buried in the soil also disappeared, turning into strands of sword qi that merged into the War Soul Sword. At this moment, the War Soul Sword had already undergone quite a few changes. The originally dark sword body had mottled bright spots, like a dusty pearl that had finally revealed the tip of an iceberg. Li Xiaotian recalled the frightening situation just now, especially the last few sword strikes of Tang Zheng, forcing the imperial advisor to flee in a sorry state. She couldn't help but feel intoxicated. At the same time, she also felt a deep sense of powerlessness. The gap between her and Tang Zheng was growing larger and larger. It was as if there was a chasm that was difficult to cross. She could not guess what level Tang Zheng's cultivation had reached. Seeing how meticulous he was with Wu, she could not help but think that it would be great if he was in Wu's position. Tang Zheng carried Wu Tsang by the waist and said solemnly, "Let's go." Together they walked out of the sword forest. The messy sword forest was especially eye-catching in this quiet village. When they walked out of the sword forest, a black mass of people surrounded them from all directions. Where did these people come from? Li Xiaotian sighed and explained, "There are a lot of people in the imperial advisor's mansion, so they must have received the orders of the imperial advisor to hide and not come out. Now that you have destroyed their sword forest, of course they will rush out and fight you to the death." Fight to the death? I think it's more like courting death. Tang Zheng was not afraid at all. His cultivation had increased by 2 levels. In addition, after comprehending the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, his confidence had increased greatly. The War Soul Sword in his hand let out a buzzing sword cry, trembling non-stop as if it had the urge to drink blood. Li Xiaotian was not optimistic and said, "Ants swallow an elephant. The strength of an individual is limited, although their strength is not as good as yours, but they can't withstand the number of people. The human wave tactic will also drag you to death." Tang Zheng could not help but remember the situation in the imperial palace, and said disdainfully, "Island nation all like human wave tactics? Since that's the case, then let's fight. You hold her. If she suffers any more injuries, I will hold you accountable." As he spoke, he handed Wu over to Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian looked at Wu, who was in his embrace at a loss, thinking, "Why is this my responsibility again?" Chapter 688. Voila! War Spirit's blade left a long trail on the ground as sparks flew everywhere. Tang Zheng took large strides and rushed out of the crowd to kill. At the front of the crowd, a familiar figure jumped into his eyes, Junko. She had actually appeared again. Moreover, she was obviously the core of this group of people. Her expression was ashen, and she was like a female leopard that had gone berserk. She roared sternly, "These people destroyed our sword forest. Kill. Use their blood as a sacrifice to the sword forest. Kill." Deafening battle cries rang out from the crowd. Tang Zheng's eyebrows rose high as War Spirit's blade glowed with light. Especially those mottled spots, they were like bright stars in the sky, shining brightly and emitting sword qi that made people's heart palpitate. But the Imperial Tutor's people's eyes were red as they charged forward without caring about anything else. Puff puff puff, War Spirit's blade was raised high, bringing with it a stream of scarlet blood. Some people screamed as they fell to the ground. Like an infectious disease, more and more people fell to the ground. Wherever Tang Zheng passed, no one could stand. At this moment he was at his peak state. Fasting grade 9, complete heaven sword and flying immortal sword technique, it was simply a match made in heaven. When they worked together, the explosive killing power made people's jaws drop. Junko was pushed to the back of the crowd. The hatred in her eyes was gradually replaced by shock. How did he become so powerful? Junko could not find the answer. She could only see her sect members fall one by one. Suddenly, as if she had gone crazy, she screamed hysterically, "Retreat, retreat!" The crowd retreated like a tide. How could Tang Zheng let go of this opportunity to chase after them? War Spirit's blade flashed as he charged towards these people. "Seal!" Junko shouted in Island Nation's language. Immediately, everyone gave up resisting and formed seals with both hands. In an instant, a mysterious aura filled the air. Tang Zheng's expression turned cold as he looked up at the sky. He saw that the enemies were all raising their hands in the air. Then a little light gathered above their heads. Finally, a sword was formed. They actually used ninjutsu and hand seals to condense a sword. The light of this sword was not bright, but there was no doubt that the lethality it contained was not to be underestimated. Kill. Everyone shouted in unison. The ground shook and the surrounding houses collapsed. The stream splashed several meters high and even the soil on the ground floated up. Tang Jing stopped in his tracks, pointed his right hand forward and shouted, "Heaven flying immortal!" Shwa. The war soul sword flew into the air and turned into a sword light. At the same time, the virtual sword above everyone's head also shot out, welcoming the war soul sword. Boom. A blinding ray of light rose from the point where the two swords collided, spreading in all directions. A powerful impact followed closely behind, raising the ground in all directions. Tang Zheng felt as if he had been hit by a huge force. He felt a sweetness in his throat and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He forcibly suppressed the urge to spit out blood and looked up. It was a vast expanse of white. There was no other color in the world. On the other side, the sound of people falling to the ground also rose and fell. Obviously, not only did Tang Jing not feel good, the people on the other side were probably even worse. After all, their cultivation was not comparable to Tang Jing's, so their endurance was naturally much weaker. His eyes were no longer of any use. Tang Jing could only release his perception, trying to figure out what was going on with the other party. Just as he circulated his true qi, a sense of danger surged in his heart. What's going on? He didn't have time to think. He rolled on the ground and leaped to the side. Boom. He could vaguely see that the place where he was standing had turned into a deep pit, and the Imperial Advisor was standing beside the pit. His eyes were blood red like a wild beast that wanted to devour a person. The Imperial Advisor really didn't escape. Tang Jing shivered, and with a wave of his hand, an even more resplendent sword light lit up in the white light, and the War Soul sword flew back into his hand from who knows where. Looking at it carefully, the mottled spots on the War Soul sword were even bigger, covering almost half of the sword body. The original black spots were like spots of rust that could peel off at any time. The exposed spots were abnormally dazzling, shining brightly. Tang Jing, you have a divine armament in your hand and a powerful sword technique. I was careless and actually fell into your trap. This is a great humiliation. I will kill you and wash away my previous shame. The Imperial Advisor said with a murderous aura. Obediently release Wu Junshan and the others and I will naturally leave. Otherwise, I'm afraid your disciples will be buried with you. Tang Jing said in a clear voice. You want to save them, right? Fine, follow me. I'll see if you have the ability. The Imperial Advisor rolled his eyes and laughed strangely. Tang Jing's head jumped, the other party's smile was too strange. Could it be that he had some tricks up his sleeve? But even if there really was a trick, he could only rush in. Because Tang Jing knew that although he had narrowly won the match, it was impossible for him to truly kill the Imperial Advisor. After all, the other party's cultivation was much higher than his. However, it was impossible for the Imperial Advisor to capture him alive. The two of them fell into a stalemate. The surrounding white light had already gradually dissipated, and their eyes finally regained their vision. With a single glance, everyone was dumbstruck. The paradise-like village had already disappeared, and in its place was ruins. It was a complete mess. On the ground, there were many disciples of the Imperial Advisor's manor, and those who could stand could be counted on one hand. Just now they had fought against Tang Zheng with the strength of a group, but they did not gain the slightest advantage. Everyone looked at Tang Zheng in shock. They had never thought that such a young person would be able to cultivate to such a godly level. Li Xiaotian was hugging Wu at the side in a daze. His eyes were lifeless, his brain had already shut down, and he had lost the ability to think. 1 against 100, the courage of 1,000 soldiers, nothing more than this. Everyone's eyes were once again focused on Tang Zheng and the Imperial Advisor. Hearing the conversation between the two, Li Xiaotian's heart could not help but tighten. He wanted to say something to dissuade them, but he swallowed his words back. At this moment, her words to Tang Zheng was simply a passing wind, and Tang Zheng would not pay attention to it. Imperial Advisor. Island nation people saw the Imperial Advisor and respectfully saluted. Even those who were lying on the ground struggled to get up. The Imperial Advisor looked at them indifferently and said, "Stand down." Everyone hesitated for a moment, but they did not dare to disobey his order. They supported the injured disciples and retreated to the side. Junko's face was full of shame. She lowered her head and retreated to the side. The Imperial Advisor looked at this group of defeated soldiers without a trace of pity. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Just now he let these people rush forward. He knew that there would be many casualties, but the final result was still beyond his expectations. He originally hoped that with so many people working together, they could at least seriously injure Tang Jing, but he did not expect that he would not even spit out a mouthful of blood. One must know that when he was hiding in the dark, he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. This move, Heaven Flying Immortal, was deeply imprinted in the depths of his soul. Even if he died, he would not forget it. Especially when he saw this move for the second time, his soul had a kind of feeling of trembling. This sword was too powerful, the brilliant heavenly might was nothing more than this. Immediately, this made him even more determined to capture Tang Jing alive. Only by pulling out all the things in his head could he make up for his loss. Otherwise, even if he killed Tang Jing, his loss would not be recovered. The imperial advisor tidied up his bad mood, glanced at Tang Jing and rushed out like a whirlwind and said, "If you want to save people, then follow me." His voice fell, he had already rushed out more than 100 meters, running straight into the depths of the village. Tang Jing took Marshal from Li Xiaotian's hand, and chased after him without saying a word. Li Xiaotian hesitated for a moment, and followed closely behind. Immediately the imperial advisor was in front, Tang Jing and Li Xiaotian were behind, Xiao Bai stood on his shoulder, and Gui Qiansui went back into his backpack. One in front, one behind as fast as lightning. As Tang Jing locked onto the imperial tutor's figure, he lowered his head to look at Marshal, who was in his embrace. Her face was already devoid of blood, and she had completely fallen into a coma, but the occasional throbbing between her brows still showed the pain he was enduring. He carefully controlled his true qi to enter Marshal's body, and soon the scene around her heart clearly appeared in his mind. The black goo worm had completely awakened and broke out of its shell like a squid. It had countless tentacles firmly wrapped around Marshal's heart. The goo worm was no longer black, but had turned blood red as if it had sucked the heart's blood. The heart's heartbeat had become very weak, as if it could stop at any time. As if sensing the threat of his true qi, the goo worm's tentacles suddenly contracted, tightly wrapping around the heart. Marshal immediately let out a cry of pain and actually woke up, but the intense pain in her eyes made Tang Jing feel as if a knife was being twisted. Where are we going?" Marshal asked weakly. "We are saving people." Marshal's eyes immediately showed a trace of joy and said, "You found them?" "Not yet, but I will definitely find them, I promise you," Tang Jing said resolutely. Marshal's mouth twitched and she squeezed out a smile. "I believe you, you must save them." Before she finished speaking, her head tilted and she fainted again. "Marshal, Marshal!" Tang Jing shouted loudly, but there was no response. Li Xiaotian looked at him from the side and wanted to say something but hesitated and finally clenched his teeth and said, "Her poison is already very serious." The meaning behind his words seemed to be that he wanted Tang Jing to give up. Tang Jing suddenly raised her head and glared fiercely at Li Xiaotian. Her neck suddenly shrunk as she felt the fear of a sword cutting across her neck. "Until the last moment I will never give up. This is what I promised her," Tang Jing said word by word. The corner of Li Xiaotian's mouth twitched and he said hesitantly, "She's so lucky to have met you." While they were talking, the group had already left the village far behind them, crossed a mountain, and finally arrived in front of a huge lake. Chapter 689. The imperial advisor stopped in front of the lake and looked at the beautiful and quiet lake. A mysterious smile appeared on his face, and a deep sense of reverence appeared between his brows. "Imperial advisor, there is no path ahead. Where else do you want to lead us?" Tang Jing asked in a deep voice. The imperial advisor turned his head to look at him and said, "Who said there's no path?" He stepped on the waves and walked towards the center of the lake. With his cultivation he could already cross the river on a reed. With a light tap of his foot on the surface of the lake, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake as he quickly walked towards the center of the lake. "What is he going to do?" Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Jing shook his head, he could not guess what the other party was thinking. "Take good care of Marshal." Tang Jing handed Marshal over to Li Xiaotian. "Even if there really is some scheme, I have no way out." Li Xiaotian hugged Marshal and looked straight at him. She wanted to say something but hesitated. "Take care of yourself." Tang Jing looked at her deeply, then looked at Marshal gently. With a leap he jumped onto the surface of the lake. The soles of his shoes sank into the lake, but he did not completely fall into the water. However, compared to the imperial advisor's leisurely stroll, it was clearly much more difficult for him to walk. Seeing that he had also arrived at the center of the lake, the imperial advisor gave him a strange smile and shouted, "Open!" Crack! As if something had been touched, cracking sounds could be heard from the bottom of the lake. The surface of the lake began to fluctuate violently, and in an instant, a huge whirlpool appeared on the surface of the lake. The imperial advisor stood by the side of the whirlpool. No matter how powerful the whirlpool was, it was unable to shake him in the slightest. Tang Zheng felt the vibration coming from beneath his feet and was surprised. What was the other party trying to do? Before he could understand, the whirlpool grew bigger and bigger, and a black hole appeared in front of him. The lake water flowed down the edge of the black hole like a huge waterfall. The black hole was incomparably dark, without a single ray of light. It was impossible to see what was below, and a formless fear struck his heart. If you want to save him, then follow me. After the state preceptor finished speaking, he jumped into the black hole. Tang Zheng stretched his neck and found that the imperial tutor's figure had been swallowed by the black hole. He turned his head to look at Li Xiaotian and Marshall who were on the shore. Li Xiaotian looked at him with burning eyes, revealing a faint concern between his brows. He suddenly turned his head and touched Xiaobai on his shoulder, saying, "Xiaobai, let's go and see what's strange down there." Xiaobai nodded heavily, his small eyes filled with a dignified expression. Whoosh! Tang Jing jumped into the black hole. He heard the sound of wind and the roaring sound of flowing water. As far as the eye could see, there was only darkness. It was like a bottomless pit. He didn't know when it would end, and he didn't know where it would lead. If an ordinary person had fallen into such a black hole, they would have screamed in fear and lost control of their bowels. But Tang Jing didn't. He was like a calm and wise man trying to find out what was waiting for him in front. The darkness had completely submerged him, and the state preceptor's figure had long disappeared. A flame blossomed on Tang Zheng's fingertips. In order to disperse the sticky darkness, he ignited the true fire. The purple true fire was exceptionally bright in the darkness, illuminating the surroundings and restoring his line of sight. The fear in his heart gradually subsided. He looked carefully and his pupils couldn't help but shrink as he exclaimed, "This is a huge cave." He could clearly see the edge of the black hole, the flowing water on the bluestone slabs, covered in moss and extended downwards to an unknown place. This cave is really deep. Tang Jing felt that he was about to fall to the earth's core. Why would there be such a strange cave in the state preceptor's mansion? Furthermore, it was built in the center of a lake and set up such a strange mechanism. Suddenly, land appeared below. Tang Jing was overjoyed. He had finally reached the end. He immediately circulated his innate qi, which continuously rotated under his feet, canceling out most of the impact. He landed steadily on the ground, but the impact still shattered the stone slabs under his feet. Where's the state preceptor? He had already raised his guard and looked around vigilantly, but there was no trace of the state preceptor. Since he led me here, he definitely won't hide and not show himself. This is definitely not a dead end, there is still a path ahead. Sure enough, he found a stone door behind the waterfall. The stone door was hidden in the darkness. If he didn't have the true fire in his hand to illuminate it, it would have been extremely difficult to find. After the water from the waterfall fell to the ground, it splashed and flowed along a huge ditch to an unknown place, not accumulating on the ground. Passing through the water curtain, Tang Jing entered the stone door. A cool breeze blew out from the stone door. There was air convection. This meant that it was not a dead end, so he carefully walked forward, guarding against any sudden attacks. He could already conclude that at this moment, the state preceptor did everything possible to lure him here. It was definitely not just to kill him, but to capture him and obtain his magic. Then the state preceptor would definitely not easily take his life. The state preceptor also understood that Tang Jing could end his life at any time, so he had to do it in one strike. A small trick would not work at all. Since that was the case, then he had to guard against the state preceptor's big move, a big move that could make him surrender. Ding dong. A crisp sound startled Tang Jing. He tripped over something hard. What the hell is this? He quickly used the true fire to illuminate the area. His breathing could not help but tighten, and he subconsciously took a step back. A skull. A terrifying skull was placed on the ground. There were still traces of blood on it, as if it had not completely dried up. This. Tang Jing felt a chill run from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. Although he was not afraid of this, why would there be a skull here? And it looked relatively fresh, as if it had just died not long ago. Suddenly he realized something, his eyes widened and he exclaimed, "Could it be theirs? Wu Junshan and the others were imprisoned, could this be one of their heads?" Once this thought drilled into his mind, it could not be dismissed. He could not help but fall into deep worry. What if it was Lan Yu's? What if it was Wu Junshan's? At this moment he gradually understood that he did not know when, but he had actually become very concerned about their safety. It was the kind of concern that came from the bottom of his heart, unknowingly and imperceptibly formed. Did he not always have a good impression of the two? How did it become like this? He shook his head hard, but he could not figure it out. In the end, he attributed all of this to the blood relationship, where blood was thicker than water. Although he had always been avoiding this kind of blood relationship, the feelings in the depths of his heart had unknowingly changed. In fact, when he was very young, he looked forward to this kind of relationship very much. Seeing that other children had parents who doted on them while he only had a grandfather, he had also fantasized that his parents would come to his side and give him endless love. In the end, none of this came true, so he buried this extravagant hope in the bottom of his heart. Ever since Lan Yu and Wu Junshan appeared, although he firmly rejected them, unknowingly, the hope buried in the depths of his heart had begun to sprout again, and it had unknowingly grown. At this moment, when he realized that the two of them might really have left him, they were separated by life and death. He could not help but feel a sense of fear. No. Suddenly he screamed and rushed out like a madman. The wind became colder as if it came from the underworld. Moreover, traces of the smell of blood were also blown by the cold wind, causing one's nerves to involuntarily tighten. Suddenly the scene in front of him opened up. He had arrived in a huge rock cave, and many stalactites were hanging upside down above his head like sharp swords. Behind the stalactites was an underground river, and the water surged, creating white splashes. The river kept flowing forward, and it was unknown where it flowed. There were some scattered bones on the ground, and Tang Zheng's heart tightened. He could tell that they were human bones, and there were mottled blood stains scattered around. This place was like hell on earth, causing people to tremble with fear. Hee hee, you're finally here. The Imperial Tutor's voice rang out again. He was standing on a high platform not far away, looking down at Tang Zheng from above. Imperial Tutor, quickly hand over the person. Tang Zheng's eyes were red with anxiety, and he roared in anger. You want the person, right? As you wish. The Imperial Tutor said with a smile, his eyes flashing like a cunning fox. The Imperial Tutor raised his head, pointed above, and said, Don't you want the person? Isn't that it? Hearing this, Tang Zheng hurriedly raised his head to look. Where was the person? Seeing Tang Zheng's puzzled expression, the Imperial Tutor reminded him, Look carefully, aren't those stalactites people? Tang Zheng was suddenly startled and looked over. Ah! Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he could not help but let out a cry of surprise. Sure enough, those were not stalactites. They were clearly people hanging upside down, but their bodies were covered by something like crystals, making them unable to move. What exactly is going on? Tang Zheng asked loudly. I always forgot to tell you something. Wu Junshan and the others were not captured by me. The Imperial Tutor said mysteriously. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. This was a problem he had always ignored. Since he could force the Imperial Tutor with his strength, then with his cultivation, it was impossible for him to take down Wu Junshan and Lan Yu in one fell swoop. One had to know that their strength had already reached the peak of perfection. It was easier said than done to capture them alive. Unless one's cultivation was several levels higher than theirs, it was impossible to succeed. But the fact was that they were captured, so there must be a secret that no one knew. Hearing the Imperial Tutor admitted himself, Tang Zheng hurriedly asked, Then who captured them? Hee hee, when the time comes you will naturally know. The Imperial Tutor deliberately mystified. You have helpers? Tang Zheng asked, Aren't you the legendary #1 expert of the island nation? Other than you, who else can do this? Tang Zheng's heartbeat quickened. This was beyond his expectations. If the Imperial Tutor had helpers, then wouldn't he be walking right into a trap? Chapter 690. Tang Zheng did not pay attention to the state teacher's sarcasm. Instead, he raised his head and stared at the stalactites. He could vaguely see that the people inside had their eyes closed, indicating that they had already fainted. Who hung them up there? What was the thing that wrapped them up? What was the point of not killing them but hanging them up like specimens? Questions came one after another, and Tang Zheng could not figure them out at all. Look, you will also become one of them in a while. The state teacher said proudly. Do the bones on the ground belong to some of them? Tang Zheng pointed at the bones on the ground and asked with an ashen face. Of course, who else is here besides them? The state teacher did not hide anything and admitted it openly. You killed people, do you still want to humiliate them like this? You even deliberately peeled off the bones. You really are a group of animals, beasts. Tang Zheng was extremely angry. Tang Zheng had also killed enemies before, but after killing them, he would never humiliate the bones of the other party. However, the other party actually pulled out the tendons and skinned them, and even casually threw away these bones. This was already an extremely perverted behavior. Others said that the island nation people were perverted, but who would have thought that it was true? Even the state teacher, a dignified master of a generation, would do such a beastly act. +2. The state teacher did not make a sound, instead he sneered proudly, "You can curse, but in a while you won't be able to curse anymore. I will pull out all the things in your head. In the future when I succeed I will set foot on the land of Huaxia. The unfinished wishes of the ancestors I will complete them. I will let the sun flag be planted in every corner of Huaxia, every inch of land. All of this is thanks to you, I really have to properly thank you." The madness on the state teacher's face became more and more intense, and the words he said became more and more crazy. He actually had such a wild ambition. Arrogant. Dream on. Not only will I destroy your imperial advisor's residence, I will also go to the imperial palace and completely destroy the spiritual pillar of your island nation. And that sick ghost emperor. Last time it was a substitute that died in his place. This time I want his real body to be completely finished. I will burn his bones and scatter his ashes, and he will never be reincarnated. Tang Jing frowned and glared. He was so angry that his whole body was about to be ignited. He had never cursed someone so viciously before, and had never thought of doing things so ruthlessly. But this time he really wanted to kill the other party from the bottom of his heart. There were too many scourges in this race, and these scourges had to be completely wiped out. That way they would be able to prevent them from doing crazy things, and prevent them from continuing to covet the magnificent Huaxia. The imperial teacher said with disdain, "In your dreams I've finished speaking. Next, your misfortune will truly descend. You can't kill me. Don't tell me you want to find your helper?" Although Tang Jing said it casually, he was already on guard against the other party's possible attack. The imperial teacher smiled mysteriously and cut his palm with his finger. Blood immediately flowed out from his palm and dripped to the ground. Tang Jing frowned. What was he doing? The blood fell on the high platform under the state teacher's feet. Traces of red light rose from the high platform and illuminated the surroundings. The smell of blood in the air immediately became stronger. The cold wind blew, and the river water churned violently as if it was boiling. Tang Jing's expression changed slightly as he exclaimed, "What's going on?" Tang Jing, surrender obediently and you will suffer less. Otherwise it will be too late for you to regret it." The state teacher's voice became ethereal and passed through the strong wind. Tang Jing subconsciously took 3 steps back. He could clearly feel the danger. Using blood as a guide, what was the state teacher summoning? Tang Jing could not help but remember the military training experience outside the northwestern border town. The demons also used human blood as a guide. Furthermore, they used a large amount of human blood as a guide to set up a formation and brought back the demon god from the outland. The state teacher was doing the same. Was he also trying to summon something from the outland? No, this was an island nation. It had nothing to do with the outland. Then why was he doing this? Before Tang Jing could figure out the relationship between them, a wet thing suddenly fell on top of his head. He subconsciously raised his head to look. Suddenly, his heart almost jumped out of his throat. A bloody mouth stopped right on top of his head. The pair of long fangs were terrifying. Demonic beast. This thought immediately appeared in his mind. At the same time, his body had already made the corresponding move. He tapped the tip of his foot and quickly slid backward, trying to avoid this ferocious fellow. Without a doubt, the state teacher used blood as a guide to summon this monster. He did not expect that there would be demonic beasts in the island nation. The ninjutsu of the island nation was only the tip of the iceberg of Huaxia. Its development was far behind Huaxia. At that time, Huaxia was the celestial empire. Island nation was equivalent to a primitive society. However, he had never heard of a demonic beast in an island nation. Demonic beasts did not appear casually. At that time, there were no demonic beasts in the western and eastern world. Only in Huaxia would there be demonic beasts. That was because Huaxia was the center of the world. The spiritual energy was the most abundant, and cultivation would be faster there. Which demonic beast would be stupid enough to go to a place with thin spiritual energy? Wouldn't that be going against themselves? Therefore Tang Jing was so surprised to see a demonic beast here. Moreover, this demonic beast's cultivation was obviously not low. Squeak squeak. Xiao Bai stared at the other party and let out a sharp cry. Xiao Bai used to be arrogant when facing the Thundercloud Beast and even the 5-clawed Golden Dragon. But now, after a series of fierce battles and being injured, his momentum involuntarily weakened a lot. Hearing Xiao Bai's cry, the demonic beast's lantern-like eyes immediately showed suspicion. It was slightly startled, but it did not retreat. Instead it moved closer. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. This was troublesome. Since the other party was not afraid of Xiao Bai, it meant that the other party's cultivation was really not ordinary. No wonder the state teacher was fearless. It turned out that he had such a helper. Tang Zheng immediately realized why Wu Junshan and the others were imprisoned here. Because, in front of this level of demonic beast, Wu Junshan and the others were obviously powerless. When the state teacher saw the demonic beast, his eyes flashed with awe. If Junko was here, perhaps she would understand the state teacher's words. Even if he wanted to release Wu Junshan and the others, it was impossible to do so. Because Wu Junshan and the others had already fallen into the hands of this demonic beast, the state teacher was powerless. Moreover, the state teacher could not really control this demonic beast, which could be seen from the awe in his eyes. Tang Jing, you have no way out. Resistance is futile. Master Orochi, please restrain him. He has many Chinese spells in his head. The state preceptor urged excitedly. Huaxia God? What the hell is that? Why have I never heard of it? Tang Jing thought. No one answered his question because that pair of huge eyes had already burst out a terrifying light, and a pair of fangs directly bit towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing continued to retreat. Suddenly Xiao Bai screamed loudly. Tang Jing was shocked and felt a strong wind behind him. Damn it! He slashed backwards with his sword, but missed. He quickly turned his head to look. Damn! Tang Jing could not help but curse. Behind him was actually a huge head with lantern-sized eyes and long fangs, and droplets of saliva dripped down from the fangs. Why are there two demonic beasts? Tang Jing felt a headache. Just one demonic beast was enough to make him suffer. Two demonic beasts, wouldn't that be asking for his life? But he did not have time to sigh and quickly moved to the left. Bang! He bumped into something hard and elastic which bounced him back immediately. He looked carefully. Damn! It was another huge head that looked exactly the same. In the darkness he could not see what he crashed into, but it was definitely the body of this demonic beast. 3 demonic beasts. How could this damn island nation have so many demonic beasts? Was this a zoo? Tang Jing felt bitter in his mouth, but before he could digest all of this, a few lantern-sized eyes lit up in the darkness. Lantern-like eyes floated above their heads, and there were the same fangs. In the end there were actually 8 heads. 8 demonic beasts. Tang Jing really felt like his heart had died. There were actually so many demonic beasts and each of them was very powerful. How could Tang Jing deal with them? Xiao Bai's eyes also changed. It was not afraid of anything, but its small eyes revealed a rare look of worry. Haha, Tang Jing, now you've given up? The state preceptor stood on the high platform, arrogant and proud as he asked. Tang Jing gritted his teeth and said, You relied on these demonic beasts to catch them, right? If you're smart. Don't think that you're the only one with divine beasts. Our island nation also has divine beasts, and they're much more powerful than your little one. The state preceptor obviously did not admit that they were demonic beasts, but classified these beasts as divine beasts. Tang Jing snorted, Demonic beasts are demonic beasts, where did divine beasts come from? Far-fetched, sticking gold on your face, don't you feel ashamed? If they really talked about divine beasts, perhaps only the 5-clawed golden dragon could be called divine beasts. As for Xiao Bai, even the 5-clawed golden dragon could not figure out its origin, so Tang Jing did not know whether it was a demonic beast or a divine beast. The state preceptor's face flushed red and he angrily said, You dare to be rude to God Orochi Tang Jing, in a moment, you will beg for death. So the so-called state preceptor's biggest reliance is not you, but these demonic beasts. The world has really been deceived by you. As long as you stay, the world will still not know this secret. In the future, when I set foot on the land of Huaxia, the world will see the divine power of Orochi. The state preceptor's eyes shone as he said with yearning. Chapter 691. Tang Jing rushed towards the stalactite in an attempt to save him. However, just as his body rose into the air, a whooshing sound came from behind him. He cursed inwardly and without turning his head, he stabbed with his sword. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. The War Soul sword stabbed into the incomparably hard scales, only causing a huge head to tilt its direction slightly. However, the other heads had already chased after him like shadows. 2 bloody mouths, one above and one below, seemed to want to tear Tang Jing into 2 halves. Tang Jing had no other choice but to save himself. The bright sword light soared into the sky. Since the opponent's scales were so hard, he did not plan to fight head-on. Instead he planned to use his wits. He cleverly feinted, the sword tip turned and directly pierced towards a large eyeball. The eyes were definitely the weakest part of a demonic beast, so Tang Jing concentrated his strength and prepared to attack the eyes. A bloody light shot out from the eyeball. The blood was like spring water, gushing up more than a meter high. Roar! The demonic beast let out a heart-wrenching scream. A violent stench gushed out from its throat, causing Tang Jing's stomach to churn. He almost vomited out the food he had last night. However, he gritted his teeth and endured it. The War Soul Sword tried to stab forward again, but the other head had already rushed over. With a kacha sound, the two fangs bit onto the War Soul Sword. Bang! His head fiercely swung, and Tang Jing was like a cannonball that was sent flying, fiercely smashing into the stone wall and tumbling down. The demonic beast's screams echoed in the surroundings. It kept twisting its body. It was obviously in extreme pain. The eyeball was completely covered in blood. This sword caused the eyeball to go blind. Insignificant human, I will eat you. I will swallow the powder you chewed into my stomach. A sharp voice suddenly rang out, echoing in Tang Jing's ears. Tang Jing was not surprised. The other party's cultivation was so high that it was normal for him to speak human language. Hearing the other party's words, Tang Jing's head twitched as if he had understood something. He asked in horror, "You ate the owner of those bones?" "Of course, it won't be long before you join them," the demonic beast said ruthlessly. Tang Jing glared at him and his anger flared up. He didn't have much good or bad feelings towards demonic beasts, but this demonic beast actually ate humans. That was absolutely unforgivable. He also finally understood why those people were hung upside down in the air like pieces of bacon. It turned out that they were all food stored by the demonic beasts. "Evil creature, what kind of demonic beast are you?" Tang Jing asked angrily. "Do you want to see my real body? Then I will fulfill your wish," the demonic beast said proudly. In an instant, the entire cave was filled with rustling sounds, and the waves in the river grew bigger and bigger, as if many things were quietly moving. Tang Jing's heart tightened and he was on full alert. Not long after, a huge monster completely appeared from the darkness, almost filling the entire cave. Tang Jing's eyes gradually widened into circles as he looked at everything in front of him in disbelief. There was only one word in his mind: ferocious. The scene in front of him was too ferocious. If a timid person saw it, they would probably be scared to death. Tang Jing was experienced and knowledgeable, but he was also deeply shocked. It turned out that his previous understanding was all wrong. The other party was not an 8-headed demonic beast, but a single demonic beast. However, it had 8 heads and 8 tails. This strange combination looked ugly and ferocious. Its entire body was black, covered with scales the size of a face, suffused with a black light. Just now, Tang Jing's War Soul Sword was unable to break through the scales, so one could imagine how strong its defense was. It gave people another impression that it was big. It was too big, so big that it almost filled the entire space, but there was still a part of it hidden in the darkness in the river. This was its real body, which made people tremble with fear. Tang Jing had even seen the 5-clawed golden dragon, but the 5-clawed golden dragon gave people a feeling of heaven's might. But this demonic beast, in addition to being ferocious, was cold, making people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. It was a completely different feeling. "Immortal, this looks like the legendary Yamada no Orochi." Gui Chinsue's small head suddenly came out of the backpack, looking at everything in front of him and thoughtfully said, "Yamada no Orochi? What's its origin?" Tang Jing heard that the state preceptor just called the demonic beast as Yamada no Orochi. He was afraid that Yamada no Orochi was its real name. Yamada no Orochi is a very ferocious demonic beast. Its body is a flood dragon and it especially likes to eat people. Every time it eats 10,000 people, it will grow 1 more head and 1 more tail. Therefore its strength will also increase by leaps and bounds. In order to pursue higher cultivation and strength, it ate people everywhere. Finally it grew 8 heads and 8 tails. Legend has it that as long as it grows 9 heads and 9 tails, it can enter the dragon gate and transform into a 9-clawed golden dragon. Gui Qiansui said tirelessly. Only the 5-clawed golden dragon was imprisoned in the imperial city, but Yamada no Orochi could transform into a 9-clawed golden dragon. As the name suggests, it must be many times more powerful than the 5-clawed golden dragon. What? It ate tens of thousands of people and killed so many people, and it can still transform into a dragon. Tang Jing was shocked and felt a chill in his heart. When ordinary people mentioned the famous ancient generals, they would often say that they killed thousands of people, but compared to Yamada no Orochi they paled in comparison. Not only did it kill people but it also ate people. It swallowed the bones into its stomach and it ate tens of thousands of people. This was simply an astronomical number, and it was enough to show its deranged nature. For cultivation and strength, it had completely lost its nature. In Huaxia's legends, the dragon had always been a righteous image. It was a sacred symbol. For such an evil demon beast to be able to transform into a dragon, it was like a big stone pressing down on one's chest, making one unable to breathe. Yes, exalted immortal. Although it had killed so many people, it still had a chance to transform into a dragon. Back then, it was only a step away from becoming a 9-clawed golden dragon. When it ate the 80,000th person, its 9th head and 9th tail immediately grew out. At that time, it was precisely the time when it transformed into a dragon. It was also the time when it was at its weakest. A very powerful cultivator appeared and fought with it for 81 days. In the end, the newly grown 9th head and 9th tail were cut off, and from then on, its hope of transforming into a dragon was cut off. Who was so powerful? Tang Zheng could not help but have a kind of worship. This cultivator was so great that he could fight against such a powerful evil beast by himself. There was no doubt that if Orochi really transformed into a 9-clawed golden dragon with its cruel nature, it would definitely cause more killings. The good deed of this Xiuzha had saved countless lives. Gui Qiansui shook his head. I don't know who this cultivator is. Later on, no one knew the whereabouts of Orochi. Some people said it was dead, but no one expected it to survive and hide here. Tang Zheng gradually became enlightened. No wonder Orochi appeared in the island nation. At that time, the island nation was a barren land, and no demon beast or cultivator came here. In order to avoid being hunted down, Orochi crossed the ocean and came to the island nation. That was why it survived until today. Since it was only one step away from becoming a 9-clawed golden dragon, does that mean its cultivation and strength are still ridiculously high? Tang Zheng suddenly realized a serious problem. If it was really so powerful, it would be invincible in this world. With its cruel nature and the tyrannical nature of the island nation, it would be the end of the world. No, when his 9th head and 9th tail were chopped off, most of his power went down the drain. So, its strength was greatly reduced. Otherwise, it would not have to escape to this barren land. Gui Qiansui explained. Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief as he thought that it was a close call. All of this was thanks to the powerful cultivator from back then. If he knew who this person was, then Tang Zheng would definitely thank him. However, I feel that its strength is still very strong. According to the legend, its strength should not be so strong. Gui Qiansui said with some doubts. Tang Zheng had an idea and said, You mean it has recovered its strength? Yes, and it has recovered a lot. Did it eat a lot of people again? Tang Zheng felt a chill in his bones. Gui Qiansui hesitated and said, It's possible. Tang Zheng turned his head and stared at Orochi. He felt more and more disgusted. He did not know how many people were buried in its stomach. The conversation between the two was heard by Orochi and the state preceptor. Orochi twisted its huge body, and looked at Gui Qiansui covetously and said, You have heard of my deeds, not simple. But you know it too late. Now I have recovered half of my strength, and there are no powerful cultivators in this world. So no one can stop me. I want to eat more people. Moreover, I found that martial artists and cultivators are the most delicious and can increase my strength the most. Therefore, I will eat all the martial artists and cultivators in the world who don't listen to my orders. That way my strength will recover faster. Orochi's 8 big heads were raised high, ferocious and crazy. Tang Zheng trembled in fear when he heard this. He glanced at the Imperial Preceptor from afar and said with disdain, Imperial Preceptor, you are really crazy. You are using your own people to feed this evil beast and help it recover its strength. You are helping the tyrant. There will be a day when you will suffer the consequences of your own actions. The state preceptor laughed crazily. Who said I used my own people to feed Orochi? I will not be so stupid. Tang Zheng's face changed slightly. Then where did you find so many people? Oh, of course it is Huaxia people. There are so many Huaxia people. Isn't it a small matter to sacrifice tens of thousands of people? Hasn't your country always wanted to control the population? I'm doing you a big favor. The state preceptor said ferociously. You are crazy. Tang Zheng was furious. The state preceptor wanted to kill Huaxia people, and it seemed that many Huaxia people had been buried in Orochi's stomach. No. Tang Zheng suddenly realized a problem. If so many Huaxia people disappeared for no reason, there must be some news. Chapter 692. Shameless, where did you go to kill so many of my compatriots? Tang Jing asked loudly. Those people were your ancestors. They had already cooked the delicious food of Orochi great god decades ago. The state preceptor said proudly. Tang Jing raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but be confused. What did this have to do with what happened decades ago? Since you are going to die soon, I am not afraid to tell you. Do you really think that the invasion war was so simple? One of the original intentions of starting this war was to find people to improve the cultivation of Orochi great god, and Huaxia is the country with the largest population near our country. Of course we fixed our eyes on you. A dusty conspiracy slowly unfolded. Perhaps many of the people involved in the war back then were not aware of this secret. Today Tang Jing also felt a sense of horror and absurdity when he heard it. It turned out that there were so many unknown secrets in the war that attracted the attention of the world. In the end, we captured tens of thousands of captives and then helped Orochi great god improve his cultivation. If the war had not ended early and Orochi great god had eaten more people, he would have recovered his former power. Why bother with this? The state preceptor's words seemed to be regretful that he could not capture more Huaxia people. Tang Jing was already furious. In this world, was there such a cruel and crazy person in the world? Too many Huaxia people died in that war, and many Huaxia people disappeared for no reason. This was a well-known fact. Those missing people must have been transported back to the country by the island nation and then offered to Orochi. Perhaps Huaxia people did not know about this. The island nation's conspiracy was too deep. Tang Jing, just you wait. After you die, it won't be long before we set foot on your land again, and then use more people to help Orochi improve his cultivation. At that time, the world will tremble under the iron hooves of the island nation. The state preceptor was enraptured as if he could see the day he described. Tang Jing's face kept changing from red to green and then to black. His mood was really fluctuating, and anger was running through every cell of his body. State preceptor, keep dreaming. That day will never come. Huaxia is no longer what it used to be. Even if I really die, the people of Huaxia will definitely rise up and fight back. They will kick you out of our country like beating a drowning dog. Tang Jing said vehemently. The state preceptor was unmoved and said, Hee, then we shall wait and see. However, you will not be able to see that day. Then he changed the topic and said respectfully to Orochi, Orochi, this person not only injured your eyes, which is an unforgivable crime. Moreover, if you let him leave and make news about you public, it will definitely attract enemies to deal with you. Therefore you must keep him here. Orochi shook his head and wagged his tail. I don't need you to command me. I will capture him alive and take all the knowledge in his head for my own use. The state preceptor nodded enviously and did not dare to say more. He retreated to the side and left the battlefield to Orochi. Orochi slithered, and his huge body had already surrounded Tang Jing from all directions. Tang Jing was like a sandwich biscuit surrounded in the center. Tang Jing clenched his teeth as he understood that this was a battle to the death. If he were to live, he would be able to expose Japan's conspiracy to the public. If he were to die, then perhaps China would really face a huge disaster. Therefore he must fight with all his strength. Bah! He spat a mouthful of saliva and rubbed his palms. He touched Whitey on his shoulder and Gui Qiansui in his backpack and said, This is a life-and-death battle. We can only fight to the death. Xiao Bai nodded heavily and squeaked in response to Tang Jing's mobilization. Gui Qiansui jumped out of the backpack and landed on the ground. He said, Immortal, you will be invincible. We can definitely leave here safely. Tang Jing nodded and said to Xiao Bai on his shoulder in a low voice, Xiao Bai, I will hold off Orochi, and you go and save the hanging people. Xiao Bai seemed to understand and nodded. Tang Jing took a deep breath and took the lead to take a step forward. He rushed up with War Soul in his hand and shouted, Kill! Whoosh! When Transcendent Flying Immortal was used, a series of exquisite sword moves immediately greeted Yamada no Orochi. Yamada no Orochi blinked contemptuously, and its huge body began to move. This space was too narrow, and it could not fully exert its advantage of being a huge monster. Its fighting power was limited a lot. Tang Jing relied on his nimble movements to engage in a fierce battle with it. He was like a dancing butterfly, shuttling between the fangs of Yamada no Orochi and its huge tail. He was surrounded by danger. The War Soul sword slashed at the scales of the Yamada no Orochi, creating sparks. It was like a dazzling firework, illuminating this narrow space more and more. The darkness was dispelled, and Orochi's body was revealed. Tang Zheng's heart was beating like a drum. If there was enough space to display its full strength, it would be hundreds of meters long, which was a bit bigger than the thundercloud beast's body. Such a huge body had been hiding in this small space. No one knew if it felt aggrieved. Tang Zheng held back Yamada no Orochi. Even though his cultivation was much weaker, he had learned too many things. As long as he was not surrounded by danger, he would often have many tricks up his sleeve to turn danger into safety. At this moment he was no longer limited to the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. Although the heaven-flying immortal sword technique could make him flustered against the Imperial advisor, it might not be useful against Orochi. Therefore, the wind-chasing sword technique, heaven-shocking bow and sun-shooting arrow were all used by Tang Zheng at the right time. Weapons and martial arts were used interchangeably, causing people to be dazzled and Orochi to go crazy. You are so young, yet you know so many spells and so many powerful treasures. Who taught you this anomaly? Orochi asked angrily. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, I, your grandfather, am a self-taught genius. You're courting death. After being scolded, Orochi flew into a rage, and its attacks suddenly became even sharper. Tang Zheng's situation was no longer optimistic. Boom! A huge tail swept over fiercely. Tang Zheng already had no way to retreat, and even the War Soul Sword was unable to hastily fight back. Tang Zheng immediately activated the 9 Revolutions Vajra technique. His entire body was like steel, preparing to take this attack head-on. Immortal, let me do it. It was unknown when Gui Qiansui arrived in front of Tang Zheng, but it suddenly became bigger like a huge shield blocking in front of Tang Zheng. Bang! The huge tail swept across the turtle's shell, producing a loud muffled sound. Tang Zheng could clearly see the pain in Gui Qiansui's eyes, and his heart tightened. Previously, when the Imperial Tutor's broken sword slashed on its turtle shell, it did not feel so much pain. It could be imagined that Orochi's attack was much stronger than the Imperial Tutor's attack. Gui Qiansui endured this attack without moving an inch, afraid that it would hurt Tang Zheng. Ever since Gui Qiansui followed Tang Zheng, not only did Tang Zheng give him cultivation techniques, he also took care of him. But he did not report too much to Tang Zheng. In this life-and-death situation he naturally had to stand up and fight for Tang Zheng. He knew how powerful Orochi was, but he still did not retreat, which showed his intention. Tang Zheng also saw Gui Qiansui's intention from this action. At that time it was a coincidence that he took Gui Qiansui in. Perhaps, deep in his heart, he still had a grudge against Gui Qiansui's actions. But when Yamada no Orochi's attack landed on Gui Qiansui's body, the grudge in Tang Zheng's heart was immediately shattered into pieces, and there was nothing left. A little turtle wants to be a hero, blocking my way. You're courting death. Orochi's anger was strong, and he did not hide his contempt for Gui Qiansui. Bang! Another huge tail swept Gui Qiansui, and the pain in Gui Qiansui's eyes became more intense, and he staggered forward. His cultivation was much lower than Orochi's. If he did not rely on his race's natural defense advantage, he would not be Orochi's opponent at all. But even so, it was a little overwhelmed after taking 2 hits head-on. Seeing this, Tang Zheng shouted, Gui Qiansui, I'll do it. Like a whirlwind, he bypassed Gui Qiansui and went to meet the huge tail, and the War Soul Sword had been slashed out. However, that giant tail was just a feint. On the other side, another giant tail quietly appeared. Tang Zheng did not have time to defend and only heard a muffled sound as the sky and earth spun. He saw stars and his throat felt sweet as he spat out a mouthful of blood. You overestimate yourself. Orochi said disdainfully. While Tang Zheng was still in the air, 2 huge tails flew in the air and rolled him with lightning speed. Crack, crack. With a crisp sound of bones, Tang Zheng spat out a big mouthful of blood. He really felt that his bones were about to be crushed by the huge twisting force. He quickly ran the 9 transformation Vajra tactics, which offset the twisting force, but he had been rolled up and could not move at all. Was he going to be captured like this? At the same time, Xiaobai had quietly jumped on the roof and came to the stalactites. The small mouth took a few deep breaths and suddenly spat out a huge flame. Whoosh! The amber-like surface melted immediately, and a series of falling sounds were heard. One by one, the pieces of meat fell to the ground, and the amber on the surface was immediately shattered. One by one they woke up. In an instant, dozens of people stood up. Although they were a little embarrassed, they were like peerless divine soldiers, full of endless fighting spirit. Everyone's eyes were burning with rage. Although they were imprisoned and couldn't move, their consciousness hadn't disappeared. Every day they were immersed in endless pain. It was not the pain of facing death, but the pain of watching their companions die in the mouth of Orochi. They could not do anything, and this feeling almost made them collapse. Of course, the conspiracy of Orochi and the island nation made them even angrier. It turned out that there were so many conspiracies hidden in the war decades ago. Martial arts sect also participated in that war, and many people were sacrificed, so that feeling was even more empathetic. Chapter 693. With so many people suddenly regaining their freedom, the killing intent they emitted caused one's heart to sway. The Imperial Grandmaster's heart couldn't help but jump a few times, but when he saw the Yamata no Orochi, his worries immediately disappeared. With the Yamata no Orochi here, all enemies were paper tigers that couldn't withstand a single blow. Lan Yu saw Tang Zheng, who was tangled in a ball by the giant tail, and her beautiful eyes immediately turned red. She was as cold as a knife as she shouted, "Let him go!" Before she finished speaking, she had already rushed out like an arrow. Like a willow catkin, she lightly landed on Yamata no Orochi's body. She kicked off the pitch-black scales with the tips of her feet and flew up. A slender hand reached out, and 2 fingers grabbed onto a protruding piece of the scale as if they were picking a flower. "Break!" An earth-shattering word came out of Lan Yu's mouth. Her fingers immediately brought about a bloody light, and the scale armor was actually removed by her. Roar! A roar mixed with pain came from the bloody mouth, and the giant tail that was wrapping around Tang Zheng couldn't help but loosen a little. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up and he jumped out. The War Soul Sword immediately slashed out a ray of fire on the scale armor, and with the help of the rebound, he landed on the ground far away. Looking up, he saw that the slim figure was still standing on the huge body, holding the huge black scale armor. She stood proudly and glared at the Yamata no Orochi. "I'm going to eat you." The Yamata no Orochi shook its head and bit towards Lan Yu with its bloody mouth. Lan Yu did not move. She waved her hand forward, and the scale armor between her fingers flew out with a whoosh. Like a black bolt of lightning, it shot towards the bloody mouth. Kacha! The scale armor accurately hit a fang that was shining with a cold light. With a crisp sound, the fang was broken into 2. Roar! Another even more miserable cry rang out. It shook the heavens and the earth, causing the rocks on the ceiling to fall down. 5 giant tails swept towards Lan Yu at the same time. Whiz! Lan Yu retreated lightly, but the giant tail followed her like a shadow. Its speed was even faster than Lan Yu's, and it caught up with her in an instant. Lan Yu's expression changed slightly. She clenched her teeth and prepared to turn around to face the enemy. However, as she was in midair, her attack power was inevitably greatly reduced. Right at this moment, a pair of large hands appeared behind her. The palms flipped and drew 9 circles. In an instant, an endless stream of energy gushed out from the circles, blocking the giant tails. When Lan Yu saw the man beside her, she couldn't help but feel relieved. Of course, this was Wu Junshan. His yin-yang harmony art had already been cultivated to perfection. His ability to use softness to overcome hardness and weakness to overcome strength could be said to have reached perfection. Bang! There was a shocking sound of impact, and the shockwave spread in all directions. Stones kept falling from the walls. Go! Wu Junshan pulled his wife's hand and quickly retreated, avoiding Orochi's attack range. The Imperial Preceptor looked at this scene with a gloomy expression. He was greatly shocked. In his mind, Orochi was a lofty and inviolable existence. However, these people had actually injured it. Moreover, Lan Yu's elegant posture and Wu Junshan's unfathomable yin-yang harmony art made the Imperial Preceptor feel a chill run down his spine. Only now did he truly experience the strength of the warriors in Huaxia. Moreover, it wasn't the strength of a single person but the strength of many. This was a kind of accumulation, and it was impossible for a newly risen island nation to have such accumulation. The Imperial Preceptor often thought that if the island nation had a few powerhouses like him, they could start another war and set foot on the rich land of Huaxia even without the help of Orochi's divine power. But now it seemed that his idea was absurd and laughable. Even if there were a few Grandmaster stage powerhouses like him, if they stepped into Huaxia, they would only be able to enter vertically and come out horizontally. At this moment he couldn't help but rejoice that the island nation had the protection of Orochi. This was the blessing of the heavens for the island nation. Otherwise, if the island nation wanted to rise, it would be a fool's dream. He looked at these dozens of experts and his eyes had already turned as cold as snow. He muttered to himself, "What's the use of you escaping? You're still going to be a delicious meal in Orochi's stomach. Thus, he looked down from above, ready to enjoy the moving scene of Orochi eating them one by one. Orochi raised its head high, and its 8 heads looked down at the crowd from above. Only 15 of its 16 lantern-sized eyeballs were left. The blood from the eyeballs that had been blinded by the War Soul Sword had already stopped, but they had turned blood red and lost their light. There were only 15 of its long fangs left. The broken fangs were like a huge mockery, silently mocking Orochi's arrogance and conceit. Lan Yu and Tang Jing, this pair of mother and son, had both given Orochi a heavy blow. Facing the condescending Orochi, everyone subconsciously gathered together. Lan Yu impatiently grabbed onto Tang Jing's hand, tears flowing down her cheeks. In fact, she was a very strong person deep down in her bones. In terms of martial arts, she was not inferior to her country. However, at this moment, her mother's nature was acting up. Her usual strength collapsed and was shattered by the impact of her tears. After surviving a calamity, Lan Yu's feelings were especially deep. Ever since she had set up camp on the island, her thoughts towards Tang Jing had been like a torrential river, accumulating over time, becoming deeper and deeper. However, she knew that Tang Jing had a grudge against her, so she didn't dare to call him personally. Every time she would ask about Tang Jing from Wu. She even recorded her conversation with Wu, and every time she thought of Tang Jing she would play the recording. Although she couldn't hear Tang Jing's voice, listening to Wu talk about Tang Jing's life was also a great happiness, and could slightly ease her longing. She often thought that if there was a day when Tang Jing was able to completely open his heart and forgive her, that would be the greatest fortune of her life. Her life would truly be complete. However, she knew that this was practically an extravagant hope. She didn't know how long it would take for it to come true. However, before she could wait for that day, she was captured by Orochi. She realized that her life was about to come to an end, and her longing for Tang Jing grew by the day. At the same time, she regretted not being able to stay by Tang Jing's side, not being able to participate in his growth, not being able to fulfill her duties and responsibilities as a mother. She felt that she had truly failed in this life. But there was no way to salvage all of this. She couldn't even see Tang Jing for the last time. However, the situation had taken a turn, and Tang Jing had actually come to save them. This caused her to be wild with joy, but at the same time she felt extremely ashamed. She couldn't do anything for him, but he actually came from afar to save them. This action caused her to be unable to show her face, but at the same time she was incomparably moved. Therefore, when she saw Tang Jing being trapped by Orochi, her heart felt as if it was being twisted by a knife. Once she was free, she would risk her life to save him. Holding Tang Jing's hand and looking at him from such a close distance, Lan Yu was both moved and heartbroken. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Tang Jing couldn't help but be moved. There were thousands of words stuck in his chest, but he couldn't say them. You really are a silly child. It was so dangerous, but you still came to save us. Lan Yu said with a choked voice. Wu Junshan also patted Tang Jing's shoulder twice. Although he didn't say a word, thousands of words were expressed in this action. You still have the leisure to reminisce? I'll eat you first. Orochi saw that he was ignored, and felt that his dignity had been swept to the ground. He roared in anger. Lan Yu raised her head and said, This ugly monster is so annoying. It ate so many of our compatriots. Kill it, cut open its stomach, skin it and pull out its tendons. That's right. Last time we were tricked by it and that was why we were captured. This time it won't be so easy. Everyone said excitedly. Tang Jing's heart moved and he asked curiously, How did you get caught here? It's all because of this damned Yamada no Orochi. One day it attacked our island. We didn't expect it to be so powerful. While we were fighting, it suddenly spat out a large amount of poisonous fog. We were careless and inhaled the poisonous fog. We were caught by it and brought here. Lan Yu said indignantly. Tang Jing suddenly realized that the traces of battle he saw on the island must have been left behind by the Yamada no Orochi when he fought with them. It was just that no one expected the Yamada no Orochi to be able to spit out poisonous mist, which was why so many people were plotted against. Otherwise, with their cultivation, how could they have been annihilated without a sound? Tang Jing raised his head, looked at the imperial advisor from afar, and said, Since you have already captured them, why did you send a warship to bombard the island? Why bother? If it wasn't for the fact that he and Wu coincidentally encountered the warship bombing the island, they probably wouldn't have been able to find them even if they dug 3 feet into the ground. It was even more impossible for them to track them down and save them from the bloody mouth of the Orochi. No one in the world knows of the existence of the Orochi. In order to cover up the whereabouts of the Orochi, we must bomb that island. The Imperial advisor said arrogantly. Since it was the Li Palace who told you their whereabouts, could it be that the Li Palace doesn't know of the existence of the Orochi? Tang Jing asked suspiciously. The Imperial advisor laughed complacently. Of course not, only the Imperial advisor and the Heavenly Emperor know of the existence of the Orochi. No one else in the world knows of its existence. The Li Palace is thousands of miles away, how could they know? Then why did they tell you this news? Of course I can guess one or two of the Li Palace's thoughts. They saw that the island nation's strength was getting stronger and stronger, so they deliberately used this incident to test our strength. I was just pushing the boat with the current. These people are not ordinary people but martial artists, and there are even great master martial artists. The effect of eating them is 100 or 1,000 times better than eating ordinary people. It will allow the Orochi's cultivation to recover faster. So you did not hesitate to expose the true strength of the island nation to capture them? Tang Jing suddenly realized. Chapter 694. Hearing this, Tang Jing was enlightened. So there was such a secret. Moreover, Li Xiaotian did not tell him the complete truth. This woman was already at the final juncture of life and death, yet she was still hiding things from him. The Li Palace was truly sinister. They actually used the lives of Wu Junshan and the others to test the Imperial advisor's residence. They had truly placed a large enough bait. When Wu Junshan and the others heard that they were trapped because of the Li Palace's instigation, they gnashed their teeth in anger. Back then, when the martial sect fell apart, Granny Li was also present. She even supported a few elders, forcing Wu Junshan to leave the martial sect. Thus, they had long regarded the Li Palace and Granny Li as enemies. Now, with the old and new grudges added together, they could not wait to kill their way into the Li Palace and take revenge. Of course, Wu Junshan was also furious, but he controlled himself for the time being. He was rather shocked. The island he had chosen was extremely well hidden, and no one else knew about it. Yet the Li Palace had managed to find their tracks in just a few short months. This intelligence network was absolutely terrifying. Wu Junshan shook his head and muttered, "From what I know of the Li Palace, their intelligence network is limited to within the country. They are not very developed outside of the country. How could even that island not escape their sharp eyes? No, there must be a problem." Plus or minus, suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. His expression became serious. Could this be related to the mysterious power behind Granny Li? Wu Junshan had always guessed that there was an even deeper boss behind Granny Li and the elders. This person had always been behind the scenes, unwilling to show himself. However, to be able to make someone as arrogant as Granny Li submit, this person was definitely not an ordinary person. This person's strength and influence were probably more powerful than Wu Junshan had imagined. Then it was not completely impossible for this person to be able to track their whereabouts. Everything could be explained. Although he had figured it all out, Wu Junshan could not feel happy. This meant that he and his subordinates would have nowhere to hide in the future. In this vast world, there was probably no place for them to hide. Wu Junshan faintly sighed. Lan Yu keenly sensed his low mood and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Wu Junshan calmed himself down and put on a cold face. He said in an unquestionable tone, "You guys go first. I'll cover you. Especially since you're injured, Tang Zheng. You can't stay here any longer. This place is too dangerous. Sect Master, we won't leave. We want to fight alongside you." The others said resolutely, as if they were ready to sacrifice themselves for a cause. "This is an order. Are you going to disobey?" Wu Junshan's face darkened as he shouted. Immediately, no one refuted him, but their eyes were filled with reluctance to part with him. However, Tang Zheng stubbornly raised his neck and said indifferently, "I'm not your subordinate. You have no right to order me around." Wu Junshan revealed an awkward expression and said resentfully, "You're injured, don't force yourself." Tang Zheng snorted coldly and declined to comment. Lan Yu grabbed Tang Zheng's hand tightly and said, "Listen to him. We'll bring up the rear. You go first." Tang Zheng looked deeply at her and firmly shook his head. "Haha, you guys are just going back and forth like this. What do you think this place is? You think you can come and go as you please?" The state teacher saw this and mocked. Wu Junshan raised his eyebrows and glanced at the state teacher like lightning. He said in a deep voice, "There's no need for you to be so noisy. I'll kill you first." Before he finished speaking, he had already launched an attack at the state teacher. The state teacher was shocked. He pointed forward and the river water soared into the sky, turning into a rain of swords that shot towards Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan drew a circle with his hands and the rain of swords shrunk inward. In an instant they were completely trapped by the circle and turned into a ball of water. Go! With a shout, Wu Junshan pushed his hands outwards. The ball of water was like a meteor flying from the sky, fiercely smashing towards the state teacher. The state teacher wanted to dodge but found that he couldn't. Thus, he watched as the water ball grew bigger and bigger in his eyes. Bang! With a loud bang, the ball of water hit his chest. Immediately, his chest quickly caved in, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He was like a kite with a broken string, ruthlessly smashing into the cave wall behind him. All of this happened in a flash. The others only saw a shadow in front of them and everything was over. Wu Junshan wanted to take advantage of the victory to give the state teacher a fatal blow, but Yamada no Orochi had already reacted. This person actually injured the state teacher in front of its eyes, which was a great insult to it. Thus, with a deafening roar, the 8 heads and tails moved side by side, attacking Wu Junshan and everyone else. None of you can escape. A mouthful of black fog spewed out from the bloody mouth, floating towards everyone. Be careful, it's this poisonous fog. Wu Junshan warned loudly. Everyone hurriedly held their breaths, not inhaling a trace of the poisonous fog. These people were all extraordinary martial artists. Holding their breaths was a small matter. All of a sudden, everyone held their breaths and fought with Yamada no Orochi. It had to be said that although this huge monster's combat power was limited by space, at the same time, the others were also limited by space. In such a narrow space, Yamada no Orochi's attack could reach any area, so no one could escape from its attack alone. Rumble. The earth shook and the mountains shook. The battle was too intense. Yamada no Orochi was fighting against everyone alone, but it was not at a disadvantage at all. Instead, some people fell to the ground due to their lack of strength, injuring their muscles and bones. In the corner, the state teacher struggled to get up, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were blood red, like a poisonous snake staring at its prey. He spat out a mouthful of blood, gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "All of you must die. I want all of you to die. None of you are a match for Yamada no Orochi." The black poisonous fog shrouded the entire space, and the light became dimmer. However, what was worse was that some people had already started coughing. Although everyone could hold their breath for a while, they couldn't do so for long. The air here was completely poisoned and there was no way to breathe. Without air they couldn't even maintain their lives, let alone fight. As expected, someone couldn't hold his breath and took a deep breath. Suddenly, the world seemed to be spinning and he fell to the ground with a thud. The others were in the same situation. Wu Junshan and the others cursed inwardly. If this continued, they would be captured again. If they were really captured, there was no hope of survival. What should they do? Wu Junshan was burning with anxiety, and his moves couldn't help but be a little more disrupted. Yamada no Orochi took advantage of this opportunity and swept his huge tail at Wu Junshan's waist, immediately throwing him far away. He only stopped when he hit the wall. Sect Master. The others turned pale with fright and cried out. Unable to hold his breath, another person fell to the ground. For a moment, the battle became more and more chaotic. The scales of victory immediately tilted, and everyone felt the pressure multiplied. Tang Jing gritted his teeth, and his cheeks were already red. He thought to himself, this can't go on. I must find a way to get fresh air. However, the way out was blocked by Yamada no Orochi, so they had no chance to escape. Upper Immortal, quickly come in here. Suddenly Gui Chinsue's voice sounded. A huge bubble floated on the ground, and Tang Jing felt his body become light as he was covered by the bubble. Fresh air. Tang Jing's eyes lit up and he took a deep breath. His limbs and bones felt unprecedentedly comfortable. His heart moved and he immediately remembered that in the South Sea, Gui Qinsui used a bubble to cover everyone, and then they could travel freely in the sea. Tang Jing patted his head. Why didn't I think of this trick? Gui Qinsui quickly helped the others. Tang Jing quickly shouted. Yes, Upper Immortal. Gui Qinsui accepted the order and quickly opened his mouth. Bubbles came out from his mouth and wrapped around everyone. Huff, everyone was relieved and took a deep breath. This long-awaited fresh air was too rare. Seeing this, the State Master's eyes turned red with envy. Gui Qinsui really had many tricks up his sleeves. He even created such a bubble, which was equivalent to dissolving Yamada no Orochi's poisonous fog. Yamada no Orochi saw that his trump card was ineffective and became angrier. "You little tortoise, how dare you ruin my plan? I will kill you first." Its ferocious mouth immediately bit down. Gui Qiansui was not agile enough and could not escape. He fell directly into Yamada no Orochi's mouth and was bitten by its two fangs. Gui Qiansui saw that the situation was not good, and immediately retracted his body into the tortoise shell, leaving only the shell to resist Yamada no Orochi's fangs. "If you were to cultivate for another 1,000 years, perhaps I wouldn't be able to do anything to this damn tortoise shell of yours. However, you're still too inexperienced right now. Break for me?" The other head said agitatedly. With a cracking sound, it was as if something had shattered. "Ah!" Gui Qiansui immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. Although Gui Qiansui's tortoise shell was hard, it could not withstand Yamada no Orochi's fangs. He had to save Gui Qiansui and could not watch him die. "Evil beast, I will fight with you!" Tang Zheng roared. He pulled the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow. He loosened his fingers and the shooting sun arrow shot towards that damned head. "Haha, you want to save it? Dream on. I want you to watch it die." Yamada no Orochi proudly laughed as it shook its head and swung its tail. The other head and tail blocked the shooting sun arrow, leaving Tang Zheng with no way to deal with it. Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety. If he delayed any longer, Gui Qiansui would be dead. Seeing this, Wu Junshan, Lan Yu and the others also rushed out of the bubble at the same time. They held their breath and attacked Yamada no Orochi, trying to save Gui Qiansui from its mouth. Just at this time, Li Xiaoyan's figure appeared at the door. She held Marshall in her arms and shouted, "Be careful, there is an enemy." "Enemy?" Chapter 695. After Li Xiaotian shouted, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. She was also someone who had fought in the Myriad Mountains, but she was still shocked by the scene in front of her. "Quickly hold your breath, there's poison in the air." Seeing that she was still in a daze, Tang Zheng hurriedly reminded her. Li Xiaotian seemed to have awoken from a dream. She hurriedly circulated her energy and held her breath, but her eyes were still fixed on the scene in front of her. Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, and the others' heroic figures swayed her heart. She was the holy maiden of the Li Palace. Since she was young, she had heard of the two's illustrious names. Subconsciously, she had been instilled with the idea of competing with them in the future. But today it seemed that the gap between her and them was too great. Looking at their heroic figures in battle, she couldn't help but be fascinated. Boom! With a loud sound, the earth quaked and the entire cave shook. The stones at the top fell down with a crash, and the river water surged several meters high. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" Even Yamada no Orochi had a suspicious look in his eyes. "Which enemy is here?" Tang Zheng's heart moved as he hurriedly asked. Li Xiaotian was just about to answer when suddenly, with a crack, a forecrack appeared above her head. An incomparably tyrannical power pierced through her head. "Quickly dodge!" Wu Junshan shouted and hurriedly stood in front of Tang Zheng. He hurriedly used the yin-yang harmony art. In the blink of an eye, 9 circles were drawn in front of him. A steady stream of energy gushed out and neutralized that terrifying power. But even so, he still couldn't stop himself from retreating several steps before coming to a stop. The others weren't as lucky as Tang Zheng. A few of them couldn't dodge in time and were directly struck by that power. Bang! 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 With a series of explosions, those people were blasted into a bloody mist. Everyone was aghast. Just what was going on? Who had launched this attack, and such a powerful one at that? Tang Zheng looked at the tall figure in front of him, his emotions fluctuating. At the critical moment, he actually risked his life to protect him. That action seemed to be a subconscious action without much thought. It was precisely this primitive impulse hidden in the depths of his heart that touched Tang Zheng's nerves. Does he really care about me that much? Tang Zheng's mind was in turmoil as he stared blankly at the back of this figure. When he was growing up, he had looked forward to the appearance of such a figure countless times. He had once learned a text called Back View. The teacher had asked him to write an essay to describe his father's back view. The other students could write beautifully, but he was at a loss for words. This was because he was a child without a father. How could he have a father? However, at this very moment, that figure appeared. He was tall and mighty, blocking that terrifying strike. His lamentation did not last long because the rumbling sound above his head was still ongoing. After this attack, a bright light pierced through the top of his head, completely illuminating every corner. Only then did everyone see the true appearance of Yamata no Orochi. It was even bigger than before, like a small mountain. Wah! The lake water penetrated through the crack like a huge waterfall, instantly drenching everyone. Urgh! Yamata no Orochi looked up to the sky and roared. Its anger seemed to evaporate the lake water. The poisonous fog was washed away by the lake water, and the air was fresh again. Tang Zheng took advantage of the opponent's distraction to jump to the mouth of Yamata no Orochi like a flash of lightning. With a move of heaven-flying immortal, the War Soul Sword fiercely slashed at the fangs that were biting Gui Qiansui. Kacha! The two fangs were cut in half. Tang Zheng grabbed Gui Qiansui and kicked the top of Yamata no Orochi's head to fly back. Seeing the delicious food in its mouth fly away, Yamata no Orochi was furious and twisted its body like a crazy demon. Rumble. Sand and stones were flying, and the cave could not hold on for long. It was on the verge of collapse, as if it could completely collapse at any time. Tang Zheng stroked Gui Qiansui's turtle shell and saw a small crack appear on the turtle shell. Blood was faintly seeping out. Tang Zheng was shocked. If he was a few steps slower, Gui Qiansui would have been bitten to pieces. Gui Qiansui, how are you? Gui Qiansui's head came out of the turtle shell. His small eyes were still filled with pain. He stammered, Immortal, I am fine. Don't talk, I will take you out of here. I will find a way to heal you. Tang Zheng said. Gui Qiansui shook his head. Immortal, you don't have to worry. I will cultivate for a few days and naturally can heal this wound. We turtles are one of the longest living species. Are you really okay? Yes. Tang Zheng was slightly relieved and carefully put Gui Qiansui into his backpack. At this time, Li Xiaotian also came to Tang Zheng's side and couldn't wait to say, 100 Change Star Lord is here. 100 Change Star Lord. Tang Zheng and Wu Junshan were shocked at the same time. The two of them had fought with the 100 Transformation Star Sovereign before, so they knew how powerful he was. Why did he come here again? Tang Zheng frowned deeply. Wasn't 100 Change Star Lord in the 100,000 Mountains? And last time he sent the demon god to the outside world to try to recruit people to start the Mountain River blood sacrifice array. After this plot was thwarted by Tang Zheng, why did 100 Change Star Lord turn to the island nation? Strange, this is too strange. Everyone be careful, 100 Change Star Lord is not a friend, and he is super powerful. Everyone gather together, we will rush out and find a chance to escape. It was not good to stay in this place for long. It was better to leave first. No matter what 100 Change Star Lord's purpose was, it was not good to fight with him. Otherwise, this small number of people was not enough to fill the gap between his teeth. The crack above their heads was getting bigger and bigger, and they could see the blue sky and white clouds above clearly. But everyone's eyes were immediately attracted by a person floating in the air. It was a delicate child with a picturesque face, like a fairy in a painting. Who else could it be but 100 Change Star Lord? Tang Zheng and the others had a deep impression of him. Even though he looked harmless, in fact he was a great devil. If they were not careful, they would die under his evil hands. 100 Faces Star Lord stared at the scene in the big hole with his big black eyes. The first thing that attracted his attention was Orochi. He smiled faintly and said, You are really here, you big snake. Orochi obviously did not know how powerful 100 Change Star Lord was. He looked up to the sky and hissed, Where did this little kid come from? I will eat you too. Oh, he likes to eat people? That's great. 100 Change Star Lord's eyes lit up. He nodded his little head and said seriously, If ordinary people heard about eating people, they would be scared out of their wits. But 100 Change Star Lord was very surprised. Demonic beasts should have the nature of demonic beasts. Eating people is good. Orochi had never heard such words from a human. He could not help but be stunned. He looked at 100 Change Star Lord suspiciously. Who exactly are you? Your future master must have a little servant like you. It must be fun. 100 Change Star Lord said seriously. He did not seem to be joking. Tang Zheng and the others heard this and their hearts skipped a beat. It turned out that 100 Change Star Lord was here to subdue Orochi. If he had Orochi, then 100 Change Star Lord's strength would reach a higher level. Perhaps more people would be harmed. Orochi obviously did not expect this answer. After being stunned for a moment, he laughed wildly. But the anger in his laughter was obvious. Who do you think you are? How dare you say that you can subdue me? Orochi said angrily and found it funny. Ever since he came to this world, no one had ever dared to say such arrogant words to him. You have personality. I like it. Alas, I really want to thank the demon god for giving me this information. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that there is a little guy like you in the island nation. 100 Change Star-Lord sighed. Such a huge monster was called a little guy. It was ridiculous. However, Tang Zheng and the others knew that 100 Change Star-Lord was a figure from the ancient times tens of thousands of years ago. Although he had a pink face, he was already a shrewd old man. It was not an exaggeration to call Orochi a little guy. What is a demon god? Yamada no Orochi asked in shock. Its whereabouts were top secret. It thought that only the state preceptor and the emperor knew about it. How could this demon god know about it? 100 Change Star-Lord did not seem to intend to attack immediately. He patiently answered Orochi's questions. He said methodically, the demon god is a member of the demon clan. In order to return to this world, the demon clan sent him to this world. Your information was given to him by the higher-ups of the demon clan. Do you really think that your whereabouts are top secret? The demon clan used to be very powerful. There are not many things in this world that can be hidden from them. Of course, your whereabouts are no exception. It's just that they don't want to disclose it to the public. Orochi's expression changed when he heard this. Of course, he knew how powerful the demon clan was. The demon clan evolved from the Chi-Ujili tribe in ancient times. They had many masters. Even in his heyday, he did not dare to break into the demon clan's base camp. Therefore, he did not doubt 100 Change Star-Lord's words. Intuition told him that what 100 Change Star-Lord said was true. However, this time, the demon clan asked the demon god to recruit you to strengthen the demon clan's strength and prepare for the arrival of the demon clan's main force. It's a pity that the demon god has been delayed by other things. He gave you to me for free. 100 Change Star-Lord added. Everyone finally realized that this was the reason why 100 Change Star-Lord appeared here. The demon clan was so insidious that they had prepared such a powerful chess piece. Tang Zheng and the others looked at each other and became very serious. Everyone knew that Orochi's fate in the hands of 100 Change Star-Lord was much worse than that of the demon god. 100 Change Star-Lord had enough strength to help Orochi recover its strength. That meant that more people would die and the people would be plunged into misery and suffering. Orochi stared at 100 Change Star-Lord with his big round eyes and said angrily, the demon clan has disappeared from this world. No one in this world can make me surrender. You can't. Chapter 696. 100 Faces Star-Lord watched as Yamada no Orochi rushed over, but he did not move. There was even a faint smile at the corner of his eyes. Seeing that Yamada no Orochi was right in front of 100 Change Star-Lord, he finally moved. He gently raised his lotus-like arm. What? The lake water boiled and soared into the air, transforming into a giant chain that coiled around the Yamada no Orochi's gigantic body, instantly locking it in place. Roar! Yamada no Orochi looked up to the sky and roared. It rolled in the air, trying to break free from the chain. Water splashed everywhere, and the chain made cracking sounds as if it would break at any time. The 100 Change Star Sovereign smirked and said, "Do you want to break free? Then tighten it a little more." As soon as he finished speaking, the chain quickly contracted. Yamada no Orochi's roar became louder and louder, and it rolled more and more violently. Boom! Its huge tail swept across and the cave collapsed completely. Thousands of huge rocks fell from above like raindrops. Let's get out of here quickly. Tang Jing took the weapon from Li Xiaotian, carried it, stepped on the falling rocks and rushed up. Yamada no Orochi could not even protect itself, so it did not have the time to care about them. Therefore, one by one they rushed out of the cave like arrows. Boom! With a loud bang, the cave was buried by huge rocks. Part of Yamada no Orochi's body was buried under the rocks, and it was still twisting its body and struggling. Rocks were flying everywhere and the scene was extremely chaotic. Tang Zheng and the others landed safely in the lake. They stepped on the lake water and quickly ran to the shore. 100 Change Star-Lord's gaze turned, and he caught a glimpse of this group of people who suddenly appeared. They were hiding in the cave just now and he had overlooked them. Who are these people? A question mark appeared in 100 Change Star-Lord's mind, and he looked at them with interest. Suddenly 100 Change Star-Lord's pupils shrank, and he fixed his eyes on a familiar figure. He could not help but exclaim, "It's him." This figure was too familiar. It did not occupy much of a place in his memory of tens of thousands of years. However, the key was that this memory was not very old, so he managed to find it in time. Tang Zheng. He subconsciously called out softly. This name had left a deep impression on him. Back then, when the 100 Transformation Star-Lord was trapped in the Buzhou Mountain, The 100 Transformation Star-Lord first used the drawing ground prison technique to trap the Heaven Monk. Then Tang Zheng and the group of uninvited guests barged in and immediately fell into the drawing ground prison. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord originally wanted to turn these uninvited guests into dolls to accompany him through the long years. However, things did not go according to plan. While Tang Zheng was unable to move, he actually called upon the 4 Symbols Venerables to break his painted ground prison, freeing everyone. After that, he went through a series of fierce battles. In the end, Tang Zheng and the others quietly escaped, which was a great humiliation to him. Moreover, he had seen Tang Zheng some time ago when he attached his divine sense to the demon god. Therefore, with the new and old hatred added together, how could he forget about Tang Zheng? Looking at Tang Zheng from afar, the calm expression on the 100 Transformation Star-Lord's face had disappeared, replaced by a murderous aura. Tang Zheng, stop right there. The 100 Transformation Star-Lord shouted from above and pointed at Tang Zheng. A pillar of water rose from the lake and turned into a huge claw, grabbing at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng hugged Marshall and turned his head slightly. When he saw the huge claw, he was shocked and prepared to defend. However, one person beat him to it. Wu Junshan stood in front of Tang Zheng to protect him. His hands formed a circle and blocked the huge claw. You're courting death. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord scolded disdainfully. His small hands immediately clenched into fists. The claw instantly contracted and grabbed Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan's figure disappeared, and the others turned pale with fright and screamed, "Sect Master! Let's see if you still dare to go against me." The 100 Transformation Star-Lord was extremely proud and turned his gaze to Tang Zheng. Suddenly, boom! With an explosion, the claw exploded and turned into water droplets that filled the sky. Wu Junshan stood proudly and stared at the 100 Transformation Star-Lord coldly, saying, "You want to kill me just like that? You think too little of me." The 100 Transformation Star-Lord was slightly stunned, but immediately became angry and prepared to attack again. At this time, Yamada no Orochi, who had been trapped by the chains, used all his skills. His body that was buried under the ground also rushed out. His huge body was completely compared to the others like a giant compared to a small dot. With a flash of black light, his huge tail whipped the chains without hesitation. Kacha, the chains exploded one after another, turning into water droplets and falling back into the lake. The 100 Transformation Star-Lord's expression changed slightly. His attention was attracted by Tang Zheng and the others, and Yamada no Orochi took the opportunity to escape. "Do you want to escape just like that? How can I let a cooked duck escape?" The 100 Transformation Star-Lord said disdainfully. His upper body slightly leaned forward and swooped down with a whistling sound. The surface of the lake rippled, and the powerful shockwave almost set off waves. "Yamada no Orochi, since you are still stubborn and unwilling to obediently surrender, then I will beat you until you surrender." The 100 Transformation Star-Lord said in a deep voice. Her rosy cheeks became gloomy. Yamada no Orochi raised his head and shook his head. Zhangya was helpless and roared, "Dream on!" With a swing of his huge tail, a 100-meter-tall wave rushed down at the 100 Transformation Star-Lord. The 100 Transformation Star-Lord was calm and immediately launched a counterattack. The battle was extremely fierce, and the bottom of the lake was still letting out loud noises and collapsing. Even the ground quickly caved in. The lake water seeped out from the ground and spread all the way to the distance. No one knew where it led to. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Zheng and the others had already escaped to the shore. Turning their heads to look, they saw this apocalyptic scene and all of them were greatly shocked. A battle of this level truly had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it was when the cultivators of this world ran amok. Back then, there were cultivators who were even more powerful than the 100 Transformation Star-Lord. They even had the legendary divine might to split the heavens and earth apart. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene that was. Lan Yu saw Marshall in Tang Zheng's embrace and asked with concern, "What happened to Marshall?" "She was poisoned by the Imperial Advisor's goo. Her life or death is unknown." Tang Zheng looked at Marshall, whose eyes were tightly shut, and said worriedly. Lan Yu's expression changed slightly. She had only heard of the goo poison, but she had never heard of it before. Lan Yu had deep feelings for Marshall and they were like mother and daughter. Lan Yu said anxiously, "Then what method is there to save him?" "The antidote is in the hands of the Imperial Advisor." "Where is the Imperial Advisor?" Looking around, there was no trace of the Imperial Advisor. Just now, we were only concerned about escaping and didn't pay attention to the Imperial Advisor. Could it be that he was buried at the bottom of the cave? Tang Jing said suspiciously. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. There was no way to verify the answer. If they couldn't find the Imperial Advisor, then there was no antidote for the goo. Tang Jing's expression immediately became even uglier. He looked at Marshall anxiously and said, "Let's leave this place first and then think of a way to save her." Everyone nodded in agreement. Wu Junshan looked deeply at Li Xiaotian, who was beside him. Li Palace and Li Xiaotian had a huge grudge. If they killed Li Xiaotian now, she would definitely have no way to resist. Li Xiaotian's expression tightened as she looked worriedly at Wu Junshan. She was also aware of the danger she was in. Her heart started to beat uncontrollably and even her breathing became hurried. Wu Junshan snorted. He had already determined from Li Xiaotian's action of hugging Marshall that she was in an alliance with his side. Thus he said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. But it's only limited to this time. If I meet you again, I won't be merciful." Not only did Grandma Li cause the Marshall sect to fall apart, she even revealed our whereabouts to the Imperial Advisor's residence. I will remember this debt and personally settle it with her in the future. Li Xiaotian's body relaxed. She knew she had temporarily passed this hurdle. Tang Jing looked deeply at her and added, "Li Xiaodan, you still haven't told me the truth. You coming to the island nation to treat the emperor was just a pretense. Your true goal was to investigate the strength of the Imperial Advisor's residence." "Humph, I will also remember this debt. In the future, I will definitely not believe your words." His tone was firm and resolute. Li Xiaotian's body trembled. She wanted to say something but hesitated. But in the end, she gave up helplessly and faintly sighed. Her lie was finally exposed. The relationship between the two sides that seemed to have improved immediately fell to the freezing point. Li Xiaotian was very dejected, but there was nothing she could do. "Let's go," Lan Yu urged. The dozens of people quickly fled the lake. The 100 Change Star Sovereign had been watching them. When she saw that they were about to escape, she immediately turned her spearhead towards them. "All of you stop right there. Don't even think about escaping." The 100 Change Star Sovereign angrily roared. Her small hand grabbed at the air and the lake water immediately condensed into a long spear. She quickly attacked everyone. Wu Junshan stopped and turned to face the long spear. Without turning his head, he shouted, "You guys go quickly. I will cover the rear." Tang Jing's expression was slightly strange. The others all stopped and shouted, "We will lend you a hand, Sect Master." "Stop right there. Do you want to disobey my order?" Wu Junshan roared, "Lan Yu, take them away." Lan Yu looked deeply at her husband and gritted her teeth. "Let's go." She took the lead and fled the lake. The others had no choice but to flee. They could only hear the rumbling sounds of fighting behind them. The sky shook as if the end of the world had arrived. Everyone had already fled far away, but the rumbling sounds of fighting were still ear-piercing. It was as if they were right next to their ears. "There are dead people." Suddenly someone shouted. There were dead bodies lying in the grass beside the road. Tang Jing glanced and immediately determined, "These people are from the Imperial Advisor's residence." When they were chasing the Imperial Advisor earlier, they did not see this corpse. This meant that they had just died. "There are more in front," someone exclaimed. "There are more here. There are more over there." Chapter 697. In this Imperial Preceptor's residence, there was only one person who could cause this kind of lethality, the 100 Faces Star Lord. Tang Jing looked around and didn't find Junko's figure among the corpses. He didn't know whether she escaped or was killed. In a flash, everyone finally came to the edge of the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Tang Jing and Li Xiaotian looked at each other and were overjoyed, exclaiming, "The thick fog is gone." There was no fog in front of them, and the winding path extended forward under their feet. It must be the 100 Faces Star Lord who broke the protective formation of the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Tang Jing guessed. Li Xiaotian nodded. This was the only explanation. If they rushed out, then everyone could escape. Tang Jing stopped and looked back. The faint sound of fighting could be heard, but he didn't know what the situation was. "Should we wait for him?" Tang Jing asked. Lan Yu looked back deeply and said resolutely, "No, he will definitely find a way to escape and then come find us." As a couple for decades, Lan Yu still had strong confidence in Wu Junshan. "Well, then we will go first." Tang Jing didn't hesitate and waved his hand, and everyone left the Imperial Preceptor's residence along the winding path. When he saw the bustling streets again, Tang Jing felt as if he was in a different world, and the others also felt their bodies relax. Speaking of which, this time they really had to thank the 100 Faces Star Lord. If he hadn't come to disturb them, they would have to go through a bloody battle to escape from Yamada no Orochi, and perhaps more people would be sacrificed. Now it was the best result. I will go first. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing and said goodbye with a complicated expression. Tang Jing looked at her deeply and said, "Next time, don't let me see you again." Li Xiaotian revealed a bitter smile. "I'm afraid that will be very difficult to achieve." In the end, the Li Palace and Tang Jing were already standing on opposite sides of each other. Given the style of the Li Palace, Li Xiaotian was well aware that it was absolutely impossible for the two sides to meet. Perhaps the next time they met, the situation would be even grimmer. Victory and defeat would be decided, perhaps even life and death. This was no longer something she could control. Tang Jing also understood this point and said in a deep voice, "Then you should take care of yourself. When the time comes, life and death will depend on your own ability." Li Xiaotian was speechless. He turned around and disappeared into the sea of people. Looking at the direction she disappeared in, Tang Jing could not help but feel a little complicated. Both of them had gone through so much to reach this point in the end. It was really fate that made fools of people. "Let's go as well," Tang Jing said, calming himself down. This group of people was like a clay ox entering the sea in the crowd. They did not cause much of a ripple as they quickly distanced themselves from the imperial advisor's mansion. As night fell, everyone arrived at a remote residence. After confirming that no one else had discovered their whereabouts, they knocked out the owner and moved in. It was already inconvenient for so many people to stay in a hotel, but they couldn't travel long distances because the most important thing right now was to save Wu. Wu was already on the verge of death. The goo worm had completely wrapped around her heart, and it could stop beating at any time. Lan Yu stroked the hair on Wu's forehead and said emotionally, "This child Wu has had a tough life since he was young. I never thought that he would have to suffer like this today." Tang Jing could not hide the pain in his eyes. In his mind he could not help but recall bits and pieces of her. It was like a movie flashing back and forth. Whoosh. He took a deep breath and said firmly, "I promise to save her. I must find a way to get along with her. Right, we definitely can't just watch her lose her life like that." Lan Yu nodded in agreement but immediately frowned. "I don't know the way of the apricot forest, so I'm helpless. Tang Jing, do you have a way?" Tang Jing calmed down and started to think. His medical skills were only half-baked, so he was afraid that he would not be able to deal with this goo worm. The goo technique was a type of magic, and in the end saving her would still depend on magic. What kind of magic could he use? For a moment he was in a terrible fix and had no clue. "I have to give it a try no matter what. Since the goo worm has such a huge reaction to the innate chi, it might be because it's afraid of my innate chi." Tang Jing's heart moved and he decided to take the risk. A strand of innate chi followed his meridians and arrived at Wu's heart. Immediately the goo worm's reaction became intense. Its ugly body quickly shrank inward, trying to avoid Tang Jing, as if it wanted to drill into Wu's heart. "Damn goo worm, come out." Tang Jing's expression changed slightly. His genuine chi surged and wrapped around one of the tentacles, trying to pull the goo out. However, the head of the goo worm had already drilled into his heart, leaving Tang Jing helpless. Marshall suddenly let out a mournful scream, his body convulsing. Lan Yu's expression changed greatly as she shouted, "Wu!" Marshall's eyes were tightly shut, unable to reply. She was already on the verge of death, her consciousness weak. "Tang Jing, how is it?" Lan Yu asked anxiously. Tang Jing's forehead was already covered in sweat. He said, "It's not easy. I'll do my best. You must save her." Tang Jing nodded and mobilized even more true chi to wrap around the entire heart. He tried to drill into the heart and destroy the goo worm. Suddenly Marshall's body stopped twitching, and even his breathing became very weak. His heart almost stopped beating. Shit. This goo worm is up to something. The goo worm had obviously sped up the speed at which it killed its host. Helpless, Tang Jing could only withdraw his genuine chi from her heart. Her heartbeat sped up a bit and her breathing became a bit stronger. Tang Jing was like dead ash. He was extremely dejected. This method still did not work. Looking at Marshall, who was like a sleeping beauty, and clearly feeling the life force gradually fading from her body, Tang Jing felt as if a knife was being twisted. Lan Yu sighed inwardly. She understood the feeling of being unable to reverse the situation. Back then, when Tang Jing died, She had almost collapsed and had nothing left to live for. At this moment, Tang Zheng's mood was not much different. Lan Yu patted his shoulder and comforted him. If Marshall knew about your feelings for her, even if there was nothing she could do, she would still be very gratified. Although the two of you usually don't get along, I can tell that she likes you. Tang Zheng did not say a word, but his heart ached even more. It's a pity that the heavens are not on your side. Otherwise the two of you would really be a match made in heaven. Perhaps the heavens are truly jealous of you, which is why they forcefully separated you two. I promised her that I would save her. Tang Zheng said in a daze. Lan Yu's eyes were moist as she choked with sobs and said, sometimes a person's strength is really weak. It can't solve all problems. Tang Zheng obviously understood this point, but he really didn't want Marshall to die like this. At this last moment he finally understood his own heart. The two of them had experienced so much together, and although it was not a pleasant period of time, Marshall had unknowingly walked into his heart and occupied a very important position. His teeth bit deeply into his lips, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, but he was completely unaware. His eyes involuntarily turned red, and he couldn't help but lean over and gently kiss her lips. He had never kissed her so gently before. Although the two of them had already kissed each other a few times, that was when Tang Zheng's pure yang force was activated. His consciousness had already sunk into chaos, and it was more of an instinct than a feeling that came from the bottom of his heart. This kiss did not contain any desire, but it was filled with deep emotions, emotions that came from the bottom of his heart. The blood on Tang Zheng's lips dyed Marshall's lips red, and the blood seeped in through his teeth. As their lips parted, Tang Zheng carried her by the waist and said, I'll take her to admire the moonlight. I've never truly accompanied her before. Oh! A cry finally broke out of Lan Yu's throat. She hurriedly covered her mouth, but it was still difficult to hide her sobbing. Tears had already flowed out of her eyes as she stared at Tang Zheng's tall figure and Marshall who was in his embrace. Marshall's figure was tall, and being held in Tang Zheng's embrace, he did not feel like a little bird, but rather like a sleeping mermaid. Lan Yu nodded incessantly and said, you guys can go. Accompany her properly. Lan Yu knew that Marshall's life had already come to an end, and there was no other way. Tang Zheng had already accepted this reality, so he planned to accompany her on the final journey of her life. Tang Zheng's eyes were moist, his legs felt as if they were filled with lead as heavy as 1,000 caddies. He walked towards the balcony step by step, as if he had used up all of his strength, and every step was incomparably heavy. He sat on the balcony with Marshall in his arms. The snow-white moonlight shone down from the sky, covering everything on the ground in a layer of silver. Bathed in the moonlight, Marshall's face was suffused with a holy radiance. Her exquisite facial features caused one's heart to palpitate. But at this moment her face was haggard. She no longer had her usual valiant appearance, causing one's heart to ache so much that it was about to break. Tang Zheng gently caressed her cheek and muttered to himself, softly recalling the bits and pieces of the two of them. The scenes in his mind turned into words and came out of his mouth. Although it was simple, it was like the most moving words of love in the world, causing people to be moved. Lan Yu looked at the two of them from afar, and vaguely heard Tang Zheng's voice. She started to sob again, her tears wetting her cheeks, and she couldn't help but fall into self-blame. She already knew that a large part of the reason why she was able to be saved this time was because of Marshall. If she hadn't discovered some clues and given Tang Zheng a lot of benefits, Tang Zheng wouldn't have come to the island nation. Then these people would only have a dead end. Therefore, everyone's lives were saved by Wu Yu. However, she could save others but she could not save herself. All of this was caused by that damned imperial advisor. If he had not given Wu that pill, then everything would have been fine. Tang Zheng looked at her face in a daze. He regretted and blamed himself. Why did he treat her so coldly in the past? He did not say a single word of gentleness to her. He even impatiently protected her at all times. Now, even if he wanted to do everything he could to get back all of this, it was impossible. One would only know how precious it was after losing it. He finally knew how precious she was, but he was going to lose her forever. Fate really played tricks on people. Ah. Chapter 698. His tears had not dried, but the grief in Tang Zheng's heart had already gradually turned into anger, as if it was about to burst out of his chest and spurt out. Imperial Advisor, Heavenly Emperor, I want you to be buried with Marshall. Tang Zheng was hysterical as he gnashed his teeth and roared. Marshall, wait for me. I'll take revenge for you. Wait for me to come back. Tang Jing turned his head and looked at Lan Yu. Lan Yu understood and immediately walked over. What are you going to do? The Imperial Advisor's whereabouts are unknown, so I'll go find the Heavenly Emperor. The fake Heavenly Emperor is dead, so the real Heavenly Emperor will also die and be buried with Marshall. Tang Jing was filled with killing intent, as if he was a god of death. If God blocked him, he would kill God. If Buddha blocked him, he would destroy Buddha. Lan Yu wanted to say something but hesitated. After hesitating for a moment, he said, I'll go with you. I'll go alone. Take good care of Marshall. Tang Jing said without any room for refutation. Lan Yu stared deeply into his eyes, understanding his thoughts and emotions, and said, All right, you go, we'll wait for you. Tang Jing leaped up and jumped down from the balcony on the second floor. A white light also jumped out from the building and jumped onto his shoulder, squeaking. Tang Jing patted Xiao Bai's shoulder, understanding its thoughts, and said, Xiao Bai, today we will start a massacre, completely destroy the Imperial Palace, kill that damned Heavenly Emperor. Xiao Bai nodded his head heavily, his eyes flickering with flames. Tang Jing turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared without a trace. The security of the Imperial Palace was extremely tight. Ever since Tang Jing had caused a ruckus in the Imperial residence, this area had entered a state of high alert, combining the light and the dark to cast an inescapable net. After such a long time, there were no longer any abnormalities, so many of the guards' vigilance had weakened by a lot. In addition, the Heavenly Emperor had reappeared and everything was on the right track. That gave people a huge reassurance. The repair work of the Kokyo was already underway. The Kokyo was one of the spiritual symbols of the island nation. Of course, it couldn't be in such a dilapidated state. The royal family was already very familiar with controlling the feelings of the people. The ordeal this time would not be a blow to them. If they handled it properly, it could even be used as an opportunity to stimulate the people again, gather them together, and work hard to make another leap in the country's strength. Just like after the war, the aftermath of the island nation did not cause the island nation to be unable to recover from the setback. Instead, the people were filled with absolute enthusiasm, causing the country to undergo earth-shaking changes in a short period of time. The national strength soared like a rocket. In the emperor's bedroom, a group of ministers sat around. These were the core figures of the island nation's power. The Sky Emperor sat on the chair, coincidentally the chair that Tang Jing felt was extremely strange. If Tang Jing saw it again, he would definitely recognize it. This chair was a miniature version of the Yamada no Orochi. The 8 lifelike heads were no different from the Yamada no Orochi. The island nation's royal family had unknowingly exposed their relationship with the Yamada no Orochi. However, the world no longer knew about the Yamada no Orochi, so they did not discover this secret. The emperor of the island nation knew that his biggest reliance was the Yamada no Orochi. Therefore, he made this chair based on the Yamada no Orochi. It was a symbol of the royal family's power, just like the dragon throne of Huaxia. The emperor looked dispirited, and there was a sickly look between his eyebrows. He was indeed very different from the substitute. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he was seriously ill. It was indeed inappropriate for him to show his face in public. It was no wonder that he found a substitute. What happened at the Imperial Advisor's residence? Why is there no news from the people you sent? The emperor coughed violently and asked with an unhappy expression. Your Majesty, the Grand Preceptor's mansion's array formation has been destroyed, and there is a very fierce battle inside. As for the specific situation, our people have not yet sent back any news, so we have to wait a little longer. A minister bowed slightly and said respectfully, Wait, you only know how to make me wait. Do you think I have to wait until everything is settled? The emperor slapped the armrest of the chair and said angrily. The others did not know that the most important thing in the Imperial Advisor's residence was the Yamada no Orochi and not the Imperial Advisor. They only thought that the emperor was concerned about the Imperial Advisor's safety. Therefore they comforted him, Your Majesty, please rest assured. The Imperial Advisor is a master of a generation. His cultivation is unfathomable. Even if there is an enemy, it will be difficult for them to hurt him. They will definitely be defeated by him. What do you know? What nonsense. The emperor said unhappily, Send more people into the Imperial Advisor's residence. However, you must give them a death order. No matter what they see, they are not allowed to leak a single word to the outside world. Otherwise they will be killed without mercy. The emperor gave the death order. If the Yamada no Orochi was exposed to the news, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. The emperor did not want this kind of exposure. Although the ministers did not understand the deeper meaning, they still respectfully accepted the order. Suddenly there was a commotion outside. Everyone's nerves immediately tensed up. The emperor held the armrest of the chair with both hands and leaned forward slightly. But even left the chair. He looked like he would run away at any time if the situation was not right. It was comical and laughable. The emperor was already like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. He had been the emperor for most of his life. Now that he was old, he had to be so frightened. He was very afraid of death. Otherwise, he would not have hurriedly invited Li Xiaotian over after hearing that the Li Palace could cure his illness. As long as there was a chance of survival, he was not willing to let it go. The more he lived in this world, the more he would enjoy the privileges and pleasure of being the emperor. If his illness could really be cured, then his good days would be very long. However, he was also a very cautious person. Otherwise, when he was about to let Tang Zheng examine his body, he would still use a substitute. He clearly wanted to use a substitute to test the Li Palace's true strength. If it was a lie and deliberately mystifying, then he, the real one, would not show his face in public again. However, he did not expect so many things to happen. The substitute was actually kidnapped and even lost his life. He often felt a lingering fear. If the person sitting on the chair that day had been him, what would have happened? He was afraid that his fate would not have been much different from the substitutes, perhaps even worse. After all, he was the real emperor, a trump card. In Tang Zheng's hands he could play a decisive role, something that the substitute could not compare to. But even so, the emperor still did not feel relaxed. Besides the pain, he was also worried that those people would come back in a swirl of dust. The emperor's nerves immediately tensed up when he heard the commotion outside. The bodyguards behind him immediately surrounded him to guard against possible attacks. "Your Majesty, let's leave this place first," someone advised. "This is my bedroom, where else can I go? Where else can I go? Quickly send someone to investigate what happened." "It's so dark, don't let it be a false alarm," the emperor said firmly. In truth, his heart was beating like a drum. The imperial palace did not allow loud noises. With such a large commotion, something must have happened. Suddenly, a person staggered in and shouted, "Your Majesty, there's an assassin." Assassin. Everyone was shocked. Their heartstrings were completely taut. The bodyguards immediately surrounded the emperor and advised, "Your Majesty, let's hide for now." The emperor's expression kept changing. Finally, he compromised, "All right, let's go." The two bodyguards on his left and right supported him as they walked towards the back of the palace. Bang! With a loud sound, the palace door was smashed into pieces by a few people. Those people fell to the ground weakly and died on the spot. "Who are you?" someone asked in island nation language. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, "I can't hear your bird language. You have harmed the martial arts. I want all of you to be buried with me." If Su Yingtian saw this scene, he would probably be scared out of his wits. He was very different from Tang Zheng. Because of his official status, he would weigh the pros and cons before doing anything. He could not be like Tang Zheng, who did as he pleased. Tang Zheng's actions this time would really provoke a war between the two countries, and even trigger the Third World War. But Tang Zheng's heart was filled with anger. He did not care about these things. Seeing a group of island nation people, the war soul in his hand did not hesitate to kill. The enemy at the front was immediately cut in half. Immediately, blood splattered everywhere and dyed the palace red. Ah! Screams rose and fell. Those powerless ministers were so scared that they were about to become idiots. Some even lost control of their bowels and were in a sorry state. The emperor didn't have time to go far. He turned his head to look and was immediately scared to death. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. He muttered to himself, "It's him. This demon is here again. Hurry up and stop him. Stop him." The heavenly emperor had already recognized Tang Zheng, and was both shocked and overwhelmed with shock. He had always sent out elite troops to search for this person's whereabouts, but in the end, it was as if the other party had disappeared from the face of the earth. Why did he rush into the imperial palace like a madman today? Did he really think that this was a public toilet? Did he really think that he could come and go as he pleased? The emperor felt bitter in his heart. In the history of the emperor, he had never been as sullen as he was. In just a short span of 10 days, he had been killed twice in his headquarters. As the ruler of a country, even the dignity of this country had been completely swept away. "Protect the emperor! Protect the emperor!" Someone shouted loudly as he pulled the emperor and quickly retreated. Tang Zheng saw the emperor from afar. He would never forget that familiar figure for the rest of his life. Thus he roared, "Emperor, I'm going to kill you." When the emperor heard this, he staggered and fell to the ground. His originally weak body was actually unable to get up. When the guard saw this, he immediately picked him up and carried him on his shoulder. Then he ran away without stopping. Tang Jing wanted to kill the emperor, but the palace was already surrounded by guards. Over 100 guards completely blocked the way out. Kill. The guards' eyes turned red as they roared. Tang Jing could not hear the island nation's language, but he could feel the monstrous killing intent. Chapter 699. Kill Without Mercy. The three words were powerful and resonant, containing the power of a thunderbolt, pouncing forward like a tiger or wolf. The bodyguards used all of their skills to fight with Tang Jing. The battle was fierce, and cold weapons and firearms were used one after another. Tang Jing was bold, he shuttled back and forth like flowing water. The War Soul Sword emitted a deathly aura, and every strike would reap a few lives. The light of the War Soul Sword became more and more resplendent, and the mottled black spots became fewer and fewer. "It's on fire." Suddenly, a clamor came from outside the door and flames soared into the sky. These wooden palaces were the best fuel, and as soon as the flames appeared, the fire quickly spread, and the few palaces immediately turned into a sea of fire. A white figure rushed out from the sea of fire and directly ran into the main hall. He glanced at Tang Jing from afar, then stepped on the enemy's head and flew towards Tang Jing. "What the hell is this?" Cries of alarm sounded from all directions, and immediately someone wanted to kill Xiao Bai. Little White Rabbit leaped into the air and dodged a bullet. When it was still in the air, it opened its mouth and spat out a ball of flame, turning the person who fired the gun into a man on fire. He screamed in pain. Tang Jing glanced at the sea of flames outside the door and praised, "Xiao Bai, good job. Today I will completely burn the imperial palace and burn it to ashes." Xiao Bai replied with a squeak, his little eyes rolling in excitement. In the distance, when the emperor saw the sea of flames, he almost fainted from anger. His entire body trembled as he muttered to himself, "The imperial palace has been destroyed by my hands, the imperial palace has been destroyed by my hands." As if he was possessed, he was like a walking corpse that was caught by the guards and quickly escaped from Tang Jing's line of sight. "Xiao Bai, chase after him first and stop the emperor." Tang Jing pointed in the direction of the emperor and said. Xiao Bai squeaked, turned into a white shadow, and swept past everyone's heads, chasing in the direction of the emperor. There were more and more enemies in front of him, and many more came in from outside the door. The War Soul Sword in Tang Jing's hand became more and more dazzling. Whoosh, whoosh. The sword light spread out in all directions, and people kept falling under the War Soul Sword. However, the other party kept charging forward, not knowing whether they were dead or alive. The people of the island nation had also gone crazy. They no longer cared about life and death. They were determined to stop Tang Jing or even kill him. "Sai, we can't go on like this. Shooting sun arrows, I'm counting on you." The shooting sun arrows were more powerful than the War Soul Sword, and were more suitable for opening up roads. Thus, with a flash of light, the War Soul Sword disappeared, and was replaced by the heaven-shocking bow and shooting sun arrows. The bowstring trembled, and the shooting sun arrow left the bowstring. The powerful shockwave caused the enemies in front of him to be blown away like straw in the wind. Many of them had their chests pierced through and died on the spot. The remaining power of the shooting sun arrows had not dissipated, and had actually pierced through the Sky Emperor's chair. The dragon throne, that was imitating the Yamada no Orochi, immediately disintegrated, turning into dust. Taking advantage of the path that was swept out, Tang Jing jumped up and followed the trajectory of the shooting sun arrows, quickly escaping from the palace. The others wanted to chase, but their speed could not be compared to Tang Jing's. "Kill." Tang Jing's beard and hair flew wildly, like a god of death. Wherever he went, the enemies would all fall to the ground. However, there were not as many enemies as there were in the main hall, so they were unable to restrain his footsteps. After a while, he rushed out of the back door of the palace. In front of him was a long passageway with carved beams and painted rafters. The flowers on both sides were blooming, and the scenery was pleasant. However, at this moment, the scenery was stained with blood, turning into an azure field. Tang Jing's heart was as stiff as iron, without the slightest bit of mercy or leniency. He was not such a bloodthirsty person, but the situation of Marshall had deeply stimulated him. Adding on the hatred he had for the island nation since he was young, He did not have the slightest bit of mercy. In front of him there was a blaze and Tang Jing shivered. He understood that he had caught up to the target, so he increased his speed and soon arrived at the scene. The few people on the ground had already been burned to charcoal, and Xiao Bai was fiercely attacking a person. This person was also dressed as a guard, but his strength was completely different, completely crushing the other guards. Great master martial artist. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted, and with a glance, he could see through the details of this person. This person was tall and strong, and was much taller and more powerful than the average island nation person. His muscles were strong and powerful, and his veins were bulging high like small pythons winding around his body, bulging his clothes. This person is even more powerful than the great master martial artist beside the substitute, although he is relatively young. Tang Jing muttered to himself, but his feet seemed to have gathered wind, and he arrived at the scene. The Sky Emperor fell to the ground, panting like a cow, sweating profusely, and looking at the two sides of the battle with a pale face. When he saw Tang Jing rushing over, a look of despair immediately appeared in his eyes. He had misjudged the situation, and the enemy was even more daring than he had imagined. He actually dared to cause trouble in the Kokyo again. This time he was not as lucky as last time. Without a substitute, the Sky Emperor was going to fight in person. The key was that Tang Zheng's killing intent was too strong, and he did not hide it at all. The Sky Emperor was not a fool. How could he not understand that Tang Zheng was really coming for him? If he did not kill him, he would definitely not give up. Of course, if he had the chance, he would not hesitate to kill Tang Zheng. In the battle with the Yamata no Orochi, Xiao Bai had exhausted too much of his energy, and now his strength was greatly reduced. Moreover, the enemy was a great master martial artist, so Xiao Bai did not have the upper hand, and could only temporarily delay the opponent's escape. "Xiao Bai, let me do it." Tang Jing shouted, and he had already made the first move. The opponent had already known Tang Jing's information. Seeing that he was going to fight personally, the great master martial artist also attacked without saying a word. This person's fist was powerful and heavy. Tang Jing collided with it a few times, and he felt that the bones in his fingers were cracking as if they were about to break. However, Tang Jing did not cower. Instead, it was as if he had been provoked, and he fought with all his might, as if he was determined to determine the victor. Bang! Another punch. Both of their fists were bleeding, but the two of them were completely unaware of it. They clashed head-on, displaying the spirit of a man to the fullest. The blood vessels on the great master's arms seemed to come to life as they continuously swam around his body like a winding python. Pa pa pa. A series of crisp sounds came from the great master's body. His muscles twitched non-stop, rapidly expanding outwards. His clothes were torn apart, revealing large chunks of bronze-colored muscles. His body grew taller at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant he looked like a human-shaped giant bear, taller than Tang Jing by a large margin. Tang Jing had seen werewolves transform before, and it was even more exaggerated and terrifying than this person, so he was not afraid. Instead, he observed the slightest change with interest. After transforming into a monk, the other party's aura became even stronger. He was like a tiger with a tiger's might. With a glare, he spoke a lot of words in a fiendish manner. Tang Jing could not understand, but he could guess that it was nothing more than ruthless words. Tang Jing laughed coldly and revealed the War Soul Sword in his hand. There must be many enemies rushing over from all directions, wanting to save the Sky Emperor. Therefore he could not waste too much time and had to end the battle quickly. Kill? Tang Jing roared, his body moved, but his sword had already flown out. Heaven Flying Immortal, combined with the Imperial Sword technique, this move was exceptionally cool. Roar! Grandmaster roared towards the sky, his entire body glowing with a faint luster. He also brandished his fist to welcome the War Soul Sword. This person actually trains in martial arts. His body's resistance to attacks is incomparably strong, but I'm afraid it's not as profound as the chaotic Vajra spell. Let's see if he can withstand the attack of the War Soul Sword. Tang Jing said. The Grandmaster obviously did not place the War Soul Sword in his eyes. Relying on his usual experience, he actually used his palms to block the War Soul Sword. His palms were suffused with a metallic luster, as if they were plated with a layer of gold, giving off an invincible feeling. Blood splattered everywhere as the War Soul Sword cut off the opponent's arm like cutting tofu. He immediately let out a muffled groan, but he actually managed to hold himself back from screaming. His veins were bulging and he was filled with regret. He had misjudged the situation. However, this time he was facing the War Soul Sword, a heaven-grade magic treasure. Moreover, it had recently absorbed the sword chi in the sword forest and had undergone a tremendous change. It was far from what ordinary swords and blades could compare to. One wrong step would lead to many more mistakes. He staggered backwards, dodging War Soul's attack trajectory. The corners of Tang Zheng's mouth curled into a cold smile as he said, "You want to escape just like that? Let me show you the essence of the heavenly flying immortal sword art." With a slight tap of his finger in the air, the trajectory of the War Soul sword immediately changed. It suddenly turned in midair and flew towards the great sage. Ah! The great sage could not help but let out a cry of surprise, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. But before he could do anything else, the War Soul sword turned into a dazzling ray of light and shot into his chest, immediately coming out from his back. With a heart-piercing chill, the War Soul sword brought along a stream of blood as it turned and flew back into Tang Zheng's hands. The great sage's eyes immediately lost their luster, turning into a pair of dead fish eyes. With a pung sound, his tall body fell to the ground with a loud bang, causing the ground to tremble violently. The emperor could not help but tremble as his eyes stared straight at the corpse. His last pillar of support. Island Nation was only a small place, and the development of martial arts was not as long as Huaxia, so there were not many experts in the past few years, not to mention a national treasure like the great sage martial artist. Tang Zheng had come to the imperial palace twice and killed 2 great sage martial artists. The emperor simply had no place to find an expert to protect him. Tang Zheng walked step by step in front of the emperor. The emperor hurriedly moved his butt and retreated in a panic, shouting, don't kill me, I'll give you whatever you want, money, riches, I promise you." With no other way out, he had to tempt them with benefits. The emperor played this kind of trick, but this kind of trick was effective on many people, but to Tang Zheng, it was a different story. Tang Zheng's face was ashen, like a block of ice. His killing intent did not diminish as he said, "There are many things in this world that cannot be exchanged with money and riches." The emperor was slightly startled, hesitated for a moment and asked, "What is that?" Chapter 700. Life. The emperor was stunned like he had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. "Whose life do you want to save? I have the best medical resources in the world that can help you." Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. Since the imperial tutor was the one who poisoned her, then did the emperor have an antidote? Seeing Tang Zheng hesitate, the emperor knew that he had found the right antidote. He continued, "Life is important. Even if you kill me, you won't be able to bring her back to life, right? Why don't you think of a way to save her?" Tang Zheng's eyes turned cold. "Do you know about the goo poison?" "What is the goo poison?" the emperor blurted out. However, he realized something and immediately changed his words. "Goo poison, right? Of course I know about it. I have the antidote." Tang Zheng shook his head. His eyes turned cold. "You don't even know about the goo poison and you still want to lie to me." The emperor really did not know about the goo poison. However, he was not willing to give up on this chance. He impatiently said, "Although I don't know about the goo poison, I can send people to investigate. I will definitely find the antidote." Tang Zheng shook his head. Even if he found the imperial tutor and used the emperor's life to threaten him, the imperial tutor might not do anything. After all, the conflict between the two sides had escalated to an unprecedented level. It was a life-and-death situation. They wanted to see the other side die, so why would they save someone? Tang Zheng tossed these unrealistic thoughts to the back of his mind and looked at the emperor expressionlessly. The emperor realized that something was wrong. He used all his strength to lie in front of Tang Zheng and said, "I am the ruler of a country. I can fulfill any of your wishes as long as you ask." It's too late. Back then when you invaded Huaxia, did you spare the lives of those who begged you? No. You created so many massacres and now you refuse to admit it. You even changed the history books. You are the most despicable people in the world. You still want to live in this world? Impossible. Tang Zheng's answer was resolute and decisive, cutting off all hope for the emperor to survive. He raised his head once more and looked at Tang Zheng with disdain. "If you kill me, the island nation and Huaxia will fall into war. You will drag both countries into an irrecoverable situation. You will be the sinner of history." Tang Zheng laughed disapprovingly. "Haha, you really think too highly of yourself. You also think too highly of the island nation. Let me tell you, Huaxia is not the same as before. It is no longer the weak country of a few decades ago. Huaxia is strong and has long stood tall in the world. On the contrary, it is your island nation that has always been living in arrogance and wants to start another war. I will wait and see. When the time comes, I will let your country have a taste of Huaxia." The emperor's expression kept changing. Shame, anger, unsightly, and anger intertwined. He stared viciously at Tang Zheng and shouted hysterically, "There will be a day when the Island Nations Juniors will complete the unfinished business of the Island Nations Juniors. We will once again set foot on your land, burn, kill, and rob. We will make your Huaxia people be slaves for generations to come." The emperor had already fallen into madness and was shouting non-stop. There was no anger on Tang Zheng's face. He only felt that this person was too pitiful. He had lived in delusion for his entire life. Could such a thing happen? Absolutely impossible. When you go to hell, open your eyes wide and watch carefully. There will be a day when your island nation will suffer 100 times, 1,000 times the pain that was inflicted on Huaxia. Tang Zheng finished coldly. Shua. His hand rose and the sword fell. The emperor's head fell to the ground and rolled far away like a rubber ball. The screams of the island nation people were getting closer and closer. Tang Zheng nodded to Xiaobai and said, "Xiaobai, burn this place." Xiaobai nodded and jumped into the air. Flames spewed out from his small mouth and instantly covered all the palaces. The Kokyo was completely turned into a sea of fire. The reinforcements who rushed over were trapped in the sea of fire and fled madly. Tang Zheng and Xiaobai left the Kokyo, leaving behind the raging fire behind them. That night, the island nation was not peaceful. The world was shaken. Even if the island nation wanted to cover it up, there was no way. This was because the news had already spread on the internet. There were pictures, videos, and everything else. Among them, there was even a blurred image of Tang Zheng's back. He stood in the middle of the raging fire with a sword in one hand and a small child standing on his shoulder. He was peerless and independent. The world was shocked. Many people began to search for the identity of this assassin. Was it someone from the island nation or someone else? Most people did not know. Of course, the news of the emperor's death spread like the plague. The Kokyo and the emperor were completely finished by this assassin. The island nation people immediately hated this assassin to the bone. As for the people of other countries, their feelings were much more complicated. Every country announced that they had nothing to do with this matter. Moreover, they righteously condemned such an irresponsible and vile action. Huaxia was no exception. It was one of the countries with the harshest words. However, that picture had already been placed on the conference table of Huaxia's higher-ups. As long as one was familiar with Tang Zheng, it was not difficult to recognize him from this picture. Especially Xiaobai's figure, it was too obvious. A man, a sword, and an animal. This combination in this world was probably only Tang Zheng alone. When Su Yingtian held this picture, he almost fell to the ground in fright. His hands trembled and he almost could not hold the picture steadily. His eyes stared straight at the back of that figure and said nervously, "This brat, why can't he stop at all? Is he really going to start a third world war?" Before he could contact Tang Zheng, he was informed to attend a meeting. When he entered the meeting room and saw the people attending, his heart could not help but beat faster. These people were all big shots that could only be seen on TV. They were a group of people with the highest authority in Huaxia. A word from each of them would affect the country's development strategy and the livelihood of thousands of families. Of course, Su Yingtian knew these people. Due to his special position, he had interacted with these people before. However, seeing so many people sitting together, he suddenly had an ominous premonition. Something big must have happened. What big thing could happen in the middle of the night? Of course, it was the neighboring island nation. His eyes were very sharp and he immediately saw a picture on the conference table. Wasn't that a picture of Tang Zheng's back? The raging fire set off his tall and straight figure. He was awe-inspiring and had a natural power. He could even feel a murderous aura coming from the picture. Dong dong dong. Another series of footsteps sounded. Su Yingtian saw a person at a glance and his heart could not help but skip a beat. He was actually paying attention to this matter. This person had a square face, thick eyebrows, big eyes, a strong back and a strong waist. He had a majestic aura and there was a strong sense of power between his brows. Su Yingtian's gaze went past this person and immediately landed on another person. In that instant, the ominous premonition in his heart grew stronger. Xing Feng, why is he beside him? The Dragon Group and the National Security Bureau had always been competing with each other. After experiencing several heavy blows from Tang Zheng, the Dragon Group had calmed down a lot. Due to the dissatisfaction of some of the higher-ups, The dragon group had also restrained themselves and even kept a low profile. But now that Su Yingtian saw the helmsman of the dragon group, Xing Feng, standing beside this person, the ominous feeling grew stronger. His gaze turned and immediately landed on the picture again. An idea came to his mind and cold sweat flowed down his head like a waterfall. This picture was submitted by the dragon group. The dragon group's intelligence system is really getting better and better. In the past, this kind of thing was done by the National Security Bureau. But this time, the dragon group had taken over the responsibility. The National Security Bureau would be in a passive situation and leave an impression of incompetence in the eyes of the higher-ups. In the future, the dragon group would definitely obtain more resources and develop faster. It would definitely not be a good thing for the National Security Bureau. Xing Feng also raised his head and looked over. When their eyes met, Xing Feng's eyes were filled with a smug smile. There was even a hint of ridicule. Su Yingtian snorted inwardly and became alert. He was afraid that tonight would not be easy. When the others saw this person, they all stood up. This person stretched his hand out and gestured for everyone to take a seat. Everyone waited for him to take a seat before they took their seats. Xing Feng explained the situation. This person said in a deep voice. Xing Feng's expression turned cold as he said, "Tonight, a shocking matter happened in our neighboring island nation. The emperor and the imperial palace were completely destroyed and turned into a pile of ashes. The mastermind behind all of this is the person in the picture." Everyone immediately looked at the picture before them. Someone narrowed his eyes and looked at it for a moment before he said, "It's just a back view. I can't tell who it is." Xing Feng seemed to have expected such an answer as he mysteriously smiled. Those who aren't familiar with him naturally won't be able to tell. But those who are familiar with him will be able to recognize him with a single glance. Everyone's interest was piqued as they asked in surprise, "You're saying that you can already confirm the identity of this person?" Xing Feng purposely kept them in suspense as he turned to look at Su Yingtian and said, "Chief Su, you should be the one to answer this question, right?" Su Yingtian was unhappy in his heart. He wished that he could shoot Xing Feng. Xing Feng was purposely digging a hole for him to jump in, but he had no choice but to jump in. If he did not speak the truth, the consequences would be even more severe. Thus, he seriously looked at the picture and said, "We have also collected this information and are about to report it to the higher-ups. As for this person, we have already determined his identity." "Oh, who is it?" Everyone was curious as to who this fierce person was. Could it be someone from a terrorist organization? Teng Zheng. Su Yingtian took a deep breath and spat out 2 words. "This name seems a little familiar. It also seems to be the name of our Huaxia people." Someone muttered. The smile in Xing Feng's eyes deepened as he said, "Chief Su, since you have already determined the identity of the other party, then continue speaking." Su Yingtian knew that he could not avoid it, so he said truthfully, "This person is from Huaxia." Wow! Immediately many people were stunned. Even though they had experienced countless big battles and major events, they were still shocked by this news. A person from Huaxia burned the royal family of an island nation to ashes. That was not enough, he even killed the emperor. Chapter 701. The group of big shots looked at each other with mixed feelings. They were shocked beyond words by this news. Someone exclaimed as if he had just woken up from a dream, "I finally remember that name, Tang Zheng. Isn't he the rising star?" Xing Feng looked at Su Yingtian meaningfully and added with a smile, "Not only that, he is also a special consultant of the National Security Bureau." This sentence immediately stirred up the nerves of the others, especially the few big shots, who immediately realized the awkwardness of Tang Zheng's clone. Tang Zheng had an official status, and he was also a consultant of the National Security Bureau. That would completely change the meaning of the matter. His personal actions would rise to official actions. This would cause friction between the two countries, and it would be seen as a very serious act of sabotage, or even an act of aggression. The big shots couldn't help but sit up straight, and their faces became unprecedentedly serious. They looked at Su Yingtian with unfriendly gazes. "Director Su, what is your explanation?" Su Yingtian felt bitter in his heart and had to explain, "Tang Zheng is indeed a consultant of the National Security Bureau, but this action is his personal action." Is that so? This is your one-sided statement. Do you think the island nation will believe it?" Xing Feng asked with a fake smile. Everyone frowned at the same time, because the answer was self-evident. The island nation obviously wouldn't believe it. "Su Yingtian, you are messing around. Gathering this kind of person to join the National Security Bureau, and he is even a consultant. Is this a consultant who is here to cause trouble? Someone couldn't help but slap the table and said angrily, Su Yingtian has helped us a lot. The emperor's brother fell into our hands because of him. In addition, he has made many contributions and his performance is very outstanding. Su Yingtian earnestly said good things for Tang Zheng. So what if we have some achievements? The mess we made this time is much more serious than those trivial achievements. How do you think we should deal with the island nation if they hold us accountable? Xing Feng asked with an unkind expression. Su Yingtian glared fiercely at Xing Feng. Xing Feng's lips curled up into a sinister smile. Su Yingtian gnashed his teeth in hatred, but there was nothing he could do. He could only say, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Today, why would the Huaxia fear an island nation? Haha, easy for you to say. Xing Feng smiled as he continued, everyone listened to his irresponsible words. He's trying to drag the country into the fire pit. For such a person to still be in charge of the National Security Bureau, a national weapon, was a blasphemy to the country and an extremely irresponsible approach. One day he will bring a bigger disaster and drag the country into a state of eternal damnation. Some people nodded their heads in agreement, while others looked hesitant. Su Yingtian's heart skipped a beat. He finally understood Xing Feng's intention. He wanted to use this incident to remove Su Yingtian from his position as the director of the National Security Agency. This way he would be able to get rid of a big problem. Su Yingtian's expression turned cold. How could he give in so easily? He retorted, I'm a soldier of the country. Why would I do such a foolish thing? Xing Feng, don't judge others by your own standards. Xing Feng did not back down and said, this matter concerns the security of the country, so it's not a small matter. It doesn't matter if I judge others by my own standards. What's important is that your people have made a huge mess and put the country into a passive and unfavorable situation. As the chief of the National Security Bureau, you should take responsibility for it. Many people looked at Su Yingtian with burning eyes. It was self-evident that they had already chosen to believe Xing Feng. Cough. Suddenly the person sitting at the top coughed. Everyone immediately fell silent and looked at him. That person looked deeply at Su Yingtian and said, the most important thing now is to find a solution. When the island nation recovers, they will definitely hold you accountable. Everyone looked at Su Yingtian. This was a hot potato. If it wasn't handled well, it would hurt the country's dignity. But if it was handled well, it wouldn't be a good thing to announce. Xing Feng looked at Su Yingtian with a fake smile. Su Yingtian was helpless and could only accept this hot potato. He raised his neck and volunteered, I'm willing to reduce the impact of this matter to the lowest. Good, you have guts. As the chief of the National Security Bureau, you must have such guts. Otherwise, how can you protect the safety of the country and its citizens? That person praised. Su Yingtian sighed in relief. Since that person had said those words, it meant that there was still a way to remedy this matter. So he wouldn't be stripped of his position right now. Disappointment flashed in Xing Feng's eyes. However, he wasn't discouraged. Su Yingtian was deeply rooted in the country, and it wasn't something that could be taken down in a short period of time. Everything had to be done step by step. There was bound to be a straw that broke the camel's back, and he just had to wait and see. Furthermore, the moment Tang Zheng returns to the country, immediately take him under control. That person's expression changed as he coldly gave out an order. Su Yingtian's heart skipped a beat. He immediately explained, Tang Zheng is a rare talent, and he definitely doesn't have any bad intentions. Just when he wanted to continue, the other party had already waved his hand and stood up. The others also stood up and sent him off with their gazes before leaving the conference room one after another. Xing Feng did not leave. Instead, he looked at Su Yingtian across the conference table. The smile on Xing Feng's face gradually blossomed as he proudly said, You've always treated Tang Zheng as a treasure and you've always protected him. Now you know how to regret it, right? He's a troublemaker, a ticking time bomb. I advise you to obediently hand him over to me, and I might even put in a good word for you for the sake of our relationship. Su Yingtian remained unmoved as he coldly looked at the other party and retorted, You want to see me make a fool of myself, right? You want to remove me from my position so that your dragon group can slowly nibble away at the National Security Bureau? Xing Feng, let me tell you, no way. Xing Feng wasn't afraid as he blinked his eyes and confidently said, Then let's wait and see. That's right, you'll only have a chance to continue playing with me if you pass this hurdle. Otherwise you'll be completely out of the game. Su Yingtian coldly snorted and left without saying a word. After returning to the National Security Bureau, he sat down on a chair and fell into deep thought. After a long time, his eyes turned cold as he sat up straight and dialed a number. "Hello, Tang Zheng." Su Yingtian went straight to the point. "You've caused me a big mess again. What's the situation over there?" Tang Zheng was on his way back to his residence when his satellite phone rang. He heard this question as soon as he picked it up. "The Imperial Palace is destroyed, the Emperor is dead, and the Imperial Tutor's fate is unknown. The Imperial Tutor's residence is also almost destroyed," Tang Zheng said indifferently. After the massacre, his anger had mostly dissipated, and his voice became calm again. "Imperial Tutor, the Imperial Tutor's residence?" Su Yingtian was slightly stunned. The Imperial Tutor's residence was too mysterious, and the information sent back didn't mention the situation of the Imperial Tutor's residence. Yes, many things have happened in the Imperial Tutor's residence, and many new discoveries have been made. As for what will happen in the end, it's not clear for the time being. Tang Zheng said truthfully. "What happened?" Su Yingtian asked curiously. "It's hard to explain in a few words. I'll talk to you in detail when we go back." Tang Zheng didn't intend to hide the matter of Orochi. It was related to Huaxia's past and the future. It was even related to the 100 Faces Star Lord. It was wise to let the authorities know about this matter. Su Yingtian really wanted to ask about this matter, but in the end he held back and changed the topic. "You've done such a big thing which will definitely cause the island nation to be on full alert. You should take advantage of the fact that the other side hasn't completed a comprehensive layout and leave this place. Otherwise you'll really be unable to escape." Tang Zheng didn't think so. He had Gui Qiansui, so it was easy for him to leave this island nation. No one could stop him. "Thank you. I'll look for you when I go back in a few days. That's all for now." Tang Zheng had already seen the small building and quickly hung up the phone. Only Su Yingtian was left holding the phone. Finally he could only sigh helplessly. Tang Zheng looked up and saw that there was no one on the balcony. His heart thumped. "You must wait for me, you must." Then he rushed into the small building like the wind and asked loudly, "Where is Marshall?" "The bedroom on the second floor." "Whiz." He came to the bedroom door. The door was ajar and Marshall was lying on the bed. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Lan Yu was sitting on the edge of the bed looking at Marshall with red eyes. "How is he?" Tang Zheng couldn't wait to ask. Lan Yu turned his head and said, "You're finally back. She's still waiting for you." Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly walked to the bedside and held Marshall's hand. He found that her eyes were still closed and she was on the verge of death. "Marshall, I'm back. I've already avenged you. The Emperor is dead and the Imperial Palace has already turned to ashes," Tang Zheng said gently. Lan Yu was slightly startled. He never thought that Tang Zheng would go out and do such a shocking thing. He patted his shoulder and said with relief, "If Marshall knows about your intentions, he will definitely be very touched." Tang Zheng squeezed out a bitter smile from the corner of his mouth. "Stay with her for a while. I'll go out first." Lan Yu gave the time to the two of them. He gently closed the door and walked out. Tang Zheng took the opportunity to sit at the head of the bed and held her in his arms. Her body was still soft and supple. Looking at her face in a daze, Tang Zheng couldn't help but feel sorrowful. He had the urge to cry out loud. "Marshall, if the heavens give me another chance, I will definitely protect you well and accompany you forever. I will definitely not be impatient with you again," Tang Zheng muttered to himself. Suddenly, his eyes turned cold as he stared at her throat. His eyes revealed a strange light. Her throat started to move as if something was crawling up her throat. It was very obvious. What's going on? He was shocked and immediately activated his innate qi into Marshall's body. In that instant he knew everything about her body like the back of his hand. Chapter 702. This was truly inconceivable. Marshall's heart was beating even more vigorously, and the most important thing was that the goo worm that was wrapped around her heart had disappeared. Of course, the goo worm could not disappear into thin air. Instead, it had moved to the throat. Tang Jing saw Marshall's movements, which meant that the goo worm was crawling along her throat towards her mouth. What was going on? Didn't the Imperial Tutor say that the goo worm would devour Marshall's heart? But now the situation was clearly different. Suddenly, Tang Zheng's expression turned cold as he discovered something strange in Marshall's mouth. The goo worm's tentacles had reached out from her throat and were greedily sucking the blood in her mouth. This blood was clearly not Marshall's blood but had extended from her lips. Tang Zheng was slightly startled and immediately came to a realization. He exclaimed in shock, "I know this is my blood." Previously he had kissed Marshall once. At that time, he had bitten his lips and blood had seeped into Marshall's mouth. However, he did not expect that the blood would have such a strong attraction to the goo worm. It had actually lured it out of Marshall's heart. This was like seeing a trace of light in the darkness. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. Without saying a word, he bit his finger and opened Marshall's mouth. He dripped his blood into her mouth. Immediately the goo worm seemed to have gone crazy. Its tentacles quickly rushed over. Not just one but several of them reached into Marshall's chest and greedily sucked the blood. Tang Zheng finally understood the whole story. He had the Nine-Yang Saint body and his blood was different from ordinary people. The goo worm especially liked his blood, so it was lured to his throat. "Come out, come out." Tang Zheng seemed to be chanting a spell, hoping to lure the goo worm out of his throat. However, things did not go as he wished. The goo worm only stretched out its tentacles but did not crawl out of the throat. It seemed that it knew that it would be dangerous if it crawled out of the throat. Damn it, this little bug is actually so cunning. Tang Zheng was greatly disappointed. He watched as the tentacles sucked his blood but the goo worm did not come out. Tang Zheng tried to stretch his finger to his throat. The blood stimulated the goo worm to become even more frenzied. All of its tentacles stretched out and wrapped around Tang Zheng's finger, sucking the blood without restraint. Tang Zheng felt a sharp pain, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. He controlled his fingers to slowly move backwards, trying to pull out the goo worm. Well, suddenly a painful murmur caused Tang Zheng's entire body to be startled, only to see Marshall's originally calm face reveal a painful expression. What happened? Tang Zheng was shocked. He quickly ran his real chi to investigate. F***CK. Tang Zheng could not help but curse. Why did the goo worm grow so many thorns and forcefully grab Marshall's throat? The goo worm grew several thorns and grabbed Marshall's throat, resisting Tang Zheng's pulling force. This goo worm has really gained intelligence. Tang Zheng turned pale with fright. If he could not get it out of his throat, then everything would be meaningless. He could not just let it continue to suck blood, right? Then wouldn't Tang Zheng die from all of his blood being sucked dry? He had to think of another way. Tang Zheng quickly freed his finger from the tentacles. He frowned and seemed to be deep in thought. The goo worm discovered that the delicious taste had disappeared and started to squirm. Marshall's body immediately twitched again. His muscles twisted and his face revealed a painful expression. No, this goo worm has gone crazy. Tang Zheng was helpless. He could only immediately put his hand into Marshall's mouth. All of the tentacles immediately wrapped around his hand. Wu stopped twitching and regained his composure, but Tang Zheng had a bitter expression on his face. Ouch! Tang Zheng screamed. He felt the tentacles reach into his skin and muscles. The intense pain caused Tang Zheng to involuntarily frown. He quickly focused his mind to check the situation. Ah! He could not help but cry out in alarm, only to see that the goo worm had disappeared, completely disappearing from Marshall's body. Damn it, where did it go this time? Tang Zheng stomped his foot. This thing would not disappear into thin air for no reason. It must have gone somewhere else. Before he could figure it out, he saw the blood vessels on his arm bulge up high. Then, with lightning speed, the bulge moved to his shoulder and went straight for his heart. What happened? Tang Zheng was shocked and quickly checked his body. He didn't know if he didn't see it, but when he saw it, he was really shocked. The goo worm actually shrunk and drilled into his blood vessels. Then it started to swim towards his heart. No, I can't let it come to my heart. Wouldn't I be controlled by it? Tang Zheng's face turned pale with fright as he subconsciously thought. He quickly circulated his true chi, wanting to intercept the goo worm halfway. However, the goo worm's reaction was faster than his. It had already arrived at his heart. All of its tentacles expanded and instantly wrapped around his heart. Tang Zheng felt his heart tighten. There was a sense of suffocation. Moreover, there was a sharp pain in his chest. Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air. His mind was shaken, and his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of despair. This damned goo worm preferred his blood, so it did not hesitate to give up on Marshall and drilled into his body in an attempt to completely devour his heart and blood. Don't even think about succeeding. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth and shouted. His true chi immediately wrapped around the goo worm. The goo worm knew that its nemesis had arrived, so it hurriedly wrapped itself around Tang Zheng's heart. Tang Zheng felt that his breathing was becoming difficult as he clutched his chest and staggered backwards, only stopping when he hit the wall with a pang. Tang Zheng felt that his blood was rapidly flowing out. Even his life was rapidly leaving his body. In short, the signs of death had arrived. He stared deeply at the unconscious Marshall and said with relief, "Marshall, it's good that you're alive." His consciousness gradually became blurry. He felt as if he was about to float into the clouds and fall into a bottomless valley. In short, this feeling was very mysterious, but it was not good at all. Bang bang. Bang bang. Tang Zheng's heart started to beat rapidly. His speed did not slow down at all. Tang Zheng suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if a soul-stirring light flashed through his eyes. "I'm awake again." Tang Zheng's voice changed. It was heavy and dignified, causing one's heart to tremble in fear. This brat is really too weak. A small goo worm actually almost caused him to lose his life. Chi Yu's heart had awakened. This voice was Chi Yu's voice, filled with killing intent. Back then, in the crater in the northeast, it was because of the awakening of Chi Yu's heart that Tang Zheng was able to successfully absorb the dragon soul and defeat the Heavenly Emperor's brother. This time, Chi Yu's heart was attacked by the goo worm. Chi Yu's consciousness had finally recovered. When he saw Tang Zheng's terrible situation, he could not help but complain. Just a small goo worm. Then use it as my nourishment." Chi Yu's heart said casually. As soon as he finished speaking, Chi Yu's heart emitted a bloody mist, which instantly enveloped the goo worm. As if the goo worm had seen its nemesis, it started to twist crazily, trying to break free from the restraints of Chi Yu's heart. "Hey, you want to escape from such a small matter? Dream on." Chi Yu's heart said in disdain. Before he finished speaking, the goo worm started to struggle. It kept twisting and waving its tentacles. Bang! Suddenly, the goo worm exploded, turning into a cloud of mist that enveloped Chi Yu's heart. After a while, the mist completely seeped into Chi Yu's heart. Everything returned to normal. This kid's character is not bad. He is decisive in killing and has a firm heart. With some nurturing, he will be a promising talent. It's just that his cultivation is too weak. It's simply a disgrace to the reputation of the Nine-Yang Saint body. How can a person with the Nine-Yang Saint body only have such a little cultivation? Yamada no Orochi has come out. Even the 100 Transformation Star Lord has come. This world is becoming more and more interesting. I really look forward to recovering my strength and rebuilding my glory. Chi Yu's heart sighed. "Tang Zheng, what's wrong?" Lan Yu's voice came from outside the door. She had heard the commotion in the room, so she had rushed over. Chi Yu's heart stopped talking. The moment Lan Yu opened the door, everything returned to normal. Tang Zheng's eyes also opened at this moment. "Nothing," Tang Zheng replied. Lan Yu heaved a sigh of relief and said, "I heard your cries of pain and thought something had happened. How is Marshall?" Tang Zheng's gaze turned and landed on Marshall. He saw that her expression was calm like a sleeping baby. "She's fine." Lan Yu was startled and almost burst into tears. She wiped the corner of her eyes and walked over with large strides, saying, her face is much rosier." Tang Zheng, why is your face so pale?" Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat as he stammered, "I." Before he could finish his sentence, he was dumbstruck as he looked at his heart in disbelief. Where's the goo worm? The goo worm had disappeared, leaving behind a strong heart that was beating rhythmically. There was nothing else going on in his body. What's going on? Why did the goo worm disappear? Even though Tang Zheng was resourceful, he could not guess what was going on. Lan Yu frowned and asked suspiciously, "Goo worm? What happened to the goo worm?" Tang Zheng immediately pulled open the clothes on his chest. His skin was smooth and there was nothing wrong with it. Lan Yu finally saw through the clues and asked anxiously, "Tang Zheng, don't lie to me. What happened to the ground?" Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. Joy appeared on his face as he said, "Marshall is fine, the goo worm in her body has completely disappeared." Lan Yu was shocked and cried out in alarm, "How could this be? How did you do it?" Tang Zheng guessed that the goo worm must have disappeared in his body. As for how it disappeared, he did not know. However, he still told her about how the goo worm absorbed his blood and then accidentally drilled into his body. Lan Yu's heart trembled when she heard this, her eyelids twitched, and her expression was filled with pain. She could not help but hold on to Tang Zheng's hand and said emotionally, "Tang Zheng, you silly child, you almost harmed yourself, do you know that?" Tang Zheng felt the other party's heartfelt concern and said, "Am I not fine?" You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.